This is our community's house. We are all guests in it here to serve our community. My name is Mike Little, Mayor of the District of North Vancouver, and so the pleasure falls to me to welcome you all here to our regular meeting of council for Monday, November 18th at 7 o'clock. We like to start off our meetings in a good way, and so Councillor Murray has offered to do our land acknowledgement. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Little. We respectfully acknowledge the original peoples of these lands and waters, specifically the Tsleil-Waututh, Squamish, and Musqueam, on whose unceded ancestral lands the District of North Vancouver is located. We value the opportunity to learn, share, and serve our community on these unceded lands.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Council, we have an agenda that's been circulated. Are there any errors or omissions from the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Hearing none, I'll accept movement from Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder on the matter? Seconded by Councillor Forbes. I'll call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Okay. Council, we have two sets of meeting minutes that have been circulated with the package. This is the October 1st public hearing and the second public hearing on that same night, also for October 1st. Any errors or omissions from those meeting minutes as presented? Hearing none, it's been moved by Councillor Murray. Is there a seconder on the matter? Second by Councillor Forbes. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Okay, carrying on this evening, we have an opportunity for public input at the front end of every regular meeting of council. We reserve a period of time of up to 30 minutes for members of the public to speak about topics of interest to them for up to 3 minutes. The council, the clerk's office does start a list ahead of time if people want to sign up in advance of the meeting. And at this point, I have no one signed up to speak in advance. And so then we're going to look to the room and the virtual room. I do see Hazen Colbert, your hand virtually, if we can get Mr. Colbert moved over to the meeting as a panelist. And also checking, would anybody else like to speak in the public input period at the front of the meeting? Okay, then start panelist. Hazen Colbert, can you hear me? May just still be attaching to the meeting here. Hazen Colbert, you are muted. Can you hear me?
Buenas noches, Mayor Little, Council. Escuchan me.
I can hear you clearly. Welcome. You have 3 minutes to address the council.
Thank you. Do we have simultaneous translation tonight from Spanish or French into English?
I'm not that skilled at that.
Okay. Well, in the context of diversity and inclusion and equity, I think that we need to move toward simultaneous translation of these council proceedings into the languages that are spoken most often in the Lower Mainland, which would be various languages such as the Cantonese and Mandarin, perhaps Persian and Russian, but that's for another day. I was very disappointed about the wait for the start of tonight's meeting, but now that we're here, I would like to be fairly brief, and I would like to read something to council tonight, and it's going to take me a minute to open up the document. There's a document that was published in 2007, and it's very timely to reference that document. It was published, and it's called it's a federal government document, and it is Canada's Design Guidelines for Wastewater Systems, British Columbia region. It was published in 2007, and it is the third edition of the publication. Publications go back some 40, actually between 20 and 40 years. Not clear exactly how far they go back. I can't quote everything from the 267-page document. That's a bit oppressive. But what I would like to do, because the document was really, really good, and that what it did was that it immediately in part one, it laid out the changes from the second edition. And remember something, this is important, that it's the 2007 edition, which means it applies to our Lions Gate wastewater treatment plant, now called the North Shore wastewater treatment plant. And I'd like to read to you the second paragraph of page 3. There is now a requirement for a feasibility report to ensure that enough information is available to allow a valid comparison of alternatives, and that the selected alternative would prove to be technically and financially feasible before proceeding to the pre-design stage. So the Canadian government required and requires a feasibility report for the move of the wastewater treatment plant from the existing site below Lionsgate Bridge to the new site on Pemberton. It's very clear. It's on page 3. It's a paragraph. And I have not been able to find a feasibility report, and I can actually confirm no feasibility report was completed. I see that Mr. Stewart is in the room, and rather than looking at the feathers of an eagle across the room, Mr. Stewart, can you direct me to the feasibility report, please?
Okay. Thank you very much for your comments, Mr. Colbert. We can see if there's a way to follow up on that, find out if the feasibility report was completed in accordance with the provincial requirement there. Interesting. Okay, thank you. Would anybody else like to address the meeting in person or virtually, just by raising your virtual hand? I see no further speakers, so we're going to carry on with this evening's agenda. We now have an opportunity for a delegation, and so today I'd like to invite the representatives from the Stewardship Centre BC to come on up and have a seat at the chair. And while you're getting ready, I'll just say that a delegation is a little bit of a different opportunity than public input, in that it's where we have a nonprofit or advisory group within the community decides to come, and they get a 5-minute opportunity rather than a 3-minute opportunity to speak about their particular issue. And actually at the end of their presentation, there's an opportunity for council to ask clarifying questions before we move receipt of the delegation. And so if you're ready, welcome. If you could start by introducing yourself and the organization you represent.
Yes, thank you. Hello, my name is Ariadne. And I'm here from the Stewardship Centre for BC. We're an environmental nonprofit based in British Columbia. And I'm here today to address the issue of free roaming cats in the district of North Vancouver. So I'm speaking to you today because this issue directly affects wildlife and local ecosystems. However, this is not just an environmental concern, it's an animal welfare and a public health concern too. That is why we follow the One Health approach, which acknowledges the interconnected risks associated with free roaming cats, an approach that is endorsed by the Canadian Veterinary Medical Association. In Canada, there are an estimated 5.4 to 9.6 million cats, free roaming cats, with 1.5 to 4.1 million being feral or unowned. An estimated 25% of domestic cats are unaltered, largely due to costs, lack of awareness, or accessibility of these spay-neuter services. Female cats can become pregnant as early as 4 to 5 months old, with a single cat producing up to 3 to 4 litters per year, and each litter containing an average of 4 to 6 kittens. Of the kittens born outdoors to stray and feral cats, 75% of them do not survive due to disease, starvation, and predators. And when left unchecked, this cycle continues, producing more kittens and resulting in too many cats and not enough homes. When allowed outdoors, cats also face many dangers themselves, including collisions with vehicles, predation by wild animals, ingestion of toxins, and exposure to the elements. On average, the life expectancy of outdoor cats is only 2 to 5 years, compared to indoor cats who can live upwards of 10 to 15 years. Cats are classified as an invasive species due to their ability to overwhelm local ecology and compete with native predators for food. Both feral and domestic cats are the leading cause of death for birds in North America, killing between 100 to 350 million birds per year, and preying on endangered species of birds, bats, and other small mammals. BC is especially vulnerable to this wildlife conservation issue, as over 300 bird species breed in BC, which is the highest of any province. And research shows that in urban and suburban settings, predation by free roaming cats significantly affects local bird populations. And on a global scale, cats have contributed to the extinction of 63 different species. Cats are also vectors of disease and parasites that can spread to other wildlife when injured. As I mentioned earlier, this is also a community health issue. Outdoor cats can spread parasites and diseases to humans, including rabies and cat scratch disease. And roaming cats can also create friction between neighbors, and a lack of policies and bylaws leaves residents without any avenue to resolve these conflicts. At the Stewardship Centre for BC, we work with partners from government, academia, conservation, and animal welfare through collaborative outreach, science-based resource development, and research. This includes ongoing research into the estimation of populations of roaming cats and native birds in Vancouver. In 2020, SCBC hosted an in-person workshop in Vancouver to meet with various stakeholders and identify local actions to make Metro Vancouver safer for cats and birds. This workshop resulted in the signing of a statement of collaboration from multiple organizations seen here on the screen. And I'll also note that we did have 2 staff members from the district attend this workshop. To effectively address this issue, a multifaceted approach that includes regulatory and educational initiatives are needed. An example of this could be to include resources on responsible cat ownership practices on your Pets and Wildlife webpage. Low-cost spay and neuter services ensure that those who face financial barriers can still prevent unwanted kittens, and the district can effectively manage feral cat colonies. Well-implemented licensing and identification programs also help to reunite lost pets with their owners, which reduces stress on local shelters and raises revenue for animal control services. Policies and bylaws that mandate responsible cat ownership practices and prevent roaming are also key to addressing this issue. As such, we recommend the district take the following actions: sign a letter of support for the Cats and Birds program, which I've included in the agenda for you. Implement a public education campaign to raise awareness of the impacts of free roaming cats and encourage responsible cat ownership practices among residents. Increase the capacity of local rescues and animal welfare organizations to provide low-cost spay-neuter services, and to adopt policies and bylaws that prevent cats from roaming at large, mitigate cat overpopulation, and protect wildlife from cat predation. We have created several resources to help you implement these recommendations, all of which can be found on our website. And I encourage you to contact us if you would like to work with us to educate residents and any assistance in implementing those recommendations. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much for your presentation and for your interest in this topic. I did take the liberty of reviewing your website. I did look at the recommended bylaws and other local government actions, and I thank you for all of that. I did want to ask you a question, though, about the benefit of free roaming cats. It's been brought to my attention that there's a point of view that free roaming cats actually have community benefits in killing rats and other vermin, that takes away our need to poison rats and to use rodenticides, which has been a subject matter at this council. We've voted to ban rodenticides within the district. So just ask for your comment on that angle, the benefit of free roaming cats in addressing these vermin populations. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for that. And yes, I did also take a look at the ban on rodenticides, which I also think is great. Yeah, so there is definitely various perceptions towards that issue. It's mixed in terms of there's not a clear answer as to whether cats are a solution to preventing rodents and that kind of thing. There is, for us at SCBC and other animal welfare organizations, though, we do recognize that it's not the most effective means of rodent control. Cats might only catch a couple if there are hundreds on like a single property, for example. So in terms of rodent control, we don't recommend using cats as an effective means to do so. There are other ways of reducing rodents on a property, which all of you, I'm sure, have already addressed in your messaging to residents. So we tend to follow that messaging as well, that we don't encourage the use of cats in preying on rodents. And it's also not as humane for the animals themselves as well. Sometimes those rodents are not killed when they're caught. They can be injured and left to suffer on their own as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your comment.
Thank you, Worship. Hi. You were going through on the slides quite fast, but a couple things caught my eye to ask you questions about. And one was a Vancouver count of cats. Has there
Yes.
actually been that kind of thing? And how is that managed? How do you do that?
Yes, so we've been working with some researchers from the University of British Columbia, and I believe that was implemented in 2020. And so what they do is they put up cameras at various sites around the city. So they're just capturing pictures of whatever comes across those cameras. And so they can get a really good sense of cats that are in those areas. You're also getting lots of pictures of other wildlife as well. So it's really interesting to see actually how these cats are in the same areas as different wildlife that are roaming through the city. So that research is still ongoing. It hasn't quite been published yet, but I'd be happy to share some preliminary results with you as well if you're interested.
That would be, I am interested. That would be good to know. One of the other things, I guess it depends on how many cameras you've got to put around the city as well, is how accurate your count can be. One of the other things though is management of a feral cat colony.
Mhm.
How do you propose that, say, the district could manage that?
Yeah, so the BC SBC actually recommends a sterilization of 80% of a feral cat colony. That would slow down the growth of that population. And that's the same with a lot of other organizations that support this kind of messaging on cat predation on local wildlife. Spaying and neutering is the most effective means to control feral cat colonies. So whether it's the district going into those areas with those colonies themselves, or supporting local animal welfare organizations to do that, and then also encouraging homeowners to get their pet cats spayed and neutered as well, so they're not going out and contributing to the growth of those populations.
Thank you.
Thank
Your
you.
report was really good. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Murray.
Thank you. Do you have data on, thank you for the presentation. Do you have any data on the North Shores cat population or cat issues?
Not North Shore specifically, no, and it is difficult to get that data. So the research that we're doing is based in the city of Vancouver, and we also have research in the Okanagan as well. So there's not much research like that going on in other areas, unfortunately. So it is a bit more difficult to get that information.
So those are two very different communities from ours, like a very
Yes.
dense populated city versus maybe a farming or more rural community in the Okanagan where maybe feral populations would exist. So no data of like pet ownership or the kind of like any data through the vets on the North Shore, or do you do any work like that?
We haven't specifically for North Vancouver. I did my best to do some research before the presentation to find that information for you, as I do understand and definitely know that that's important data to know. We do work with veterinarians, collaborating with them to inform their clients of different best practices, but we don't have any data on cat ownership in the district of North Vancouver or rates of sterilization and stuff like that. But
Yeah.
I would love to know that.
Yeah,
for
I think
sure.
that would be important when you're asking for bylaws in municipalities, because it may be a problem in some municipalities, but not necessarily this one. Are you aware that this municipality has considered a cat bylaw in the past?
No, I haven't actually.
Yes. I can't remember, but it was 20 years ago.
Before my time.
Over 20 years. Yeah, check the archives. I can just check the archive in my brain. About over 20 years ago, we considered a cat bylaw. And I think the concern, it was not passed, it was defeated. And I think the concerns were the ability to enforce our enforcement. We have many enforcement challenges. And often bylaws are an expectation that people have that something will absolutely stop right away, and that's not the case. So there are concerns about it, but I think education campaigns are good. That can go into the vets. And I always feel like our community, I'm so proud of our community with animals. I think we're I think the North Shore is a very responsible place to have an animal. That's why you don't have a lot of stray cats in the shelters or in our local vets, because people don't give them up. They look after them or they adopt them. I'm a cat and a dog person, and one of my cats was succumbed to a coyote, sadly. And, you know, because it was an outdoor cat, and I can't keep a cat inside. That's my own personal view, but she didn't bring me ever a bird. So I think there's a lot in here that's good, but I think there's a lot that I would need to know in order to pursue considering a bylaw. But thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you. Absolutely.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you for the presentation. Every now and then I look out my home and I see, a cute little cat go by, and to be honest, I don't know if it's someone's pet or free roaming. So very interesting information that you provide. Just to help us understand, one of your programs or one of your suggestions, call to action is, participate in, sterilizing or spay and neutering. I have no concept of how much that would cost. Like, can you give me an order of magnitude? Like, it would cost $1,000 to treat 100 cats. Like, I have, no understanding of that. Can you help me with that?
So for the average pet owner, I believe in North Vancouver, Metro Vancouver, to go to a veterinarian to get their cat neutered or spayed could be upwards of $500. That's not the case for all veterinary clinics, but just for one cat alone, that is quite a significant amount for many people. In terms of a low cost spay or neuter service, there could be a rebate that the city or district offers for homeowners. So if they were to go and get their pet spayed or neutered, they can then get some of that portion of that money back. There are also clinics that will just offer lower cost services for local residents as well.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Beck.
Thank you very much for the presentation. I agree with Councillor Murray. I had outdoor cats growing up, and it was always a challenge keeping them inside. And we always lost them. A couple of times we lost cats, and it was really sad, especially as a little kid losing your cat. You cited a couple of, or a news article there of other municipalities that had adopted some bylaws to this regard. Can you mention which municipalities have done that?
Yeah, and these are all within the last 10 years or so. So yeah, 20 years ago, I think it wasn't as common. So the city of Richmond, the city of Surrey, and most recently the city of Nanaimo have implemented these bylaws. There are also many other cities within BC, the town of Osoyoos as well in the Okanagan, they've implemented that as well. So those can range from limits on the number of cats being owned per household. Typically that addresses cat hoarders, not the average pet owner. There's the mandatory spay and neuter by 6 months of age, mandatory licensing or permanent identification. So either a tattoo or a microchip as well. So those are the typical policies that you would see in these kinds of bylaws.
There's been a bit of a range.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Yep, that's great. And I can't help but think about Bob Barker and The Price is Right when it comes to awareness. At the end of every show, he used to remind his viewers to spay and neuter your pets. Thank you very much for the presentation.
Thank you.
I was thinking the same thing. Thank you, Councillor. I don't see any further questions from council at this time. Councillor Hanson, you were the first speaker. Would you like to move the receipt of the delegation?
I would, thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Murray. Okay, I'll call the question on receipt. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion carries. On behalf of the council, thank you very much for your delegation today.
Thank you.
I didn't propose a consent ahead of time, but there are a couple of items that could be considered for consent. It's late in the game to just throw them at you, but I was considering the 8.3, the issuance of the Ridgewood DP and the FireSmart Community 8.9. Anyone have an issue with 8.3 or 8.9 being consented? Would you like either of those items to be withdrawn? Okay, so I'll propose that as a consent agenda. Is there a seconder for that as a consent agenda? Seconded. Thank you very much. We'll call the question on the matter. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. So if you're here for items 8.3 and 8.9, 9, those items have just passed. So it allows some of our staff who are going to be sticking around for 8.9 to wrap up early. All right, the first item up of regular business for discussion is item 8.1. This is the MONOVA Strategic Plan 2024 to 2027. Welcome. And so we have Zoe from MONOVA here to present to us. Welcome.
Yeah. All right. Good evening, Mayor Little, and members of council. Thank you very much for having me here this evening. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you all and provide an update on the MONOVA's new strategic plan. My name is Zoe Makoff de Miranda. I'm the director of MONOVA, the Museum and Archives of North Vancouver. And I did include the full strategic plan with the council report I submitted, so I will not be going through the full plan in detail, but I will give kind of a high-level look at the plan, and I'd like to highlight a few of the ways in which I feel our new strategic plan supports the strategic goals and vision of council. So just to start off, I do want to acknowledge that both the Museum and Archives of North Vancouver are located on the traditional ancestral lands of the Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh First Nations. We're very grateful to do our work alongside our Coast Salish friends and colleagues, and we're grateful to the district and City of North Vancouver for the support you provide in doing our work. In the strategic plan, we did provide some context setting on the cultural landscape that we're operating in. That has shifted a little bit versus our previous strategic plan. And I did just want to highlight before I start what I see as the importance of a museum and archives. A museum and archives help us value and understand where we live, work, and play. They can help us connect and form a sense of identity and community. They provide space for research, collecting, conservation, and to a space for interpretation of our tangible and intangible heritage. It's an opportunity to inspire community engagement, dialogue, and reflection, and space to honor the Truth and Reconciliation Commission calls to action. Before I do go into, again, our new strategic plan, this is actually a screenshot from our previous strategic plan 2020 to 2023. One aspect I did want to highlight is that our mandate has not changed. We continue to serve as the municipal custodian of the city and district cultural, archival, and museum collections, as was agreed upon between the city and district in 1995. As you see from the snapshot, our vision for the previous strategic plan and our mission were both written at a time that the new museum was being built. That was an area of focus for the previous strategic plan. And the vision talked about being an inspirational and transformative community hub where the stories of North Vancouver's people, places, and past come to life. We're very grateful to now have the Museum of North Vancouver alongside our beautiful archives, Inland Valley. And working through our new strategic plan, I think really the focus was, now that we have these, two locations, how are we going to use these to serve the community? So our new vision is to inspire belonging and community connection across the diverse voices and histories of North Vancouver. As well, our previous strategic plan talked about exploring the past, present, and future. And I think in our new strategic plan and in the planning process, we really identified that an exploration of the past, present, and future it doesn't really go far enough. We really need to reflect on our past to help us understand our present and consider how we can build our future together. So it's through that lens that our new strategic plan was written. And our strategic priorities looking ahead are continuing to elevate public awareness and brand recognition. That, of course, incorporates both the museum and archives, where there is definitely opportunity to continue increasing awareness. Continuing to strengthen our financial sustainability and capacity, which includes increased fundraising and continuing to diversify our revenue streams. Continuing to engage our community by creating connections with North Vancouver residents and continuing to encourage interaction and dialogue. Continuing to enhance visitor experience at both the museum and archives, and continuing to forge and maintain strong and diverse partnerships. I think that's particularly important when you look at museums and archives and the colonial past, I think, as institutions, to be a trusted partner and collaborator that honors diverse perspectives. So looking at our new strategic plan, again, I mentioned I do want to touch on a few areas where I feel that our strategic plan connects with your strategic goals and community vision. So starting with fostering community well-being, culture, and safety. At MONOVA, we strive to create equitable spaces and opportunities to build connection, which help improve residents' health and well-being. Working in collaboration with Squamish and Tsleil-Waututh Nations, we create space for culture sharing, which helps advance community knowledge, appreciation, and understanding of our local Indigenous communities and their history on these lands since time immemorial. We provide all ages programming, creating opportunities for intergenerational learning, and through our collections, exhibits, and programs, we work to highlight the rich and diverse history of North Vancouver and the diversity of our residents who live here today. We strive to make our exhibitions, programs, we strive to create our exhibitions and activities to be accessible for all. We do have sensory-friendly programming, dedicated sensory-friendly programming once a month, and we do have sensory kits that are available for all museum visitors as well. And by respecting, considering, and including the diverse perspectives of all residents, we work to create an engaged and inspired community. Another goal, a strategic priority of council here, is to lead in climate emergency action and environmental management. So at MONOVA, we develop programming and education around climate action in general, and looking at our local North Shore landscape in particular. So we do promote MONOVA as a valuable educational partner at the elementary, secondary, and post-secondary levels. Our school programs incorporate, incorporate curriculum-based learning outcomes, First Peoples principles of learning, and many of our programs incorporate themes on climate and environmental protection. This is true for one of our exhibitions that we hosted last year called Agents of Change, Chief Dan George Legacy, and a core theme of that exhibition was environmental protection, and that was developed in collaboration with members of Tsleil-Waututh Nation. We do collaborate with local knowledge keepers to share Indigenous perspectives on environmental protection. And I think we have great opportunities to collaborate with other agency partners to tell stories about how the work they are doing create a more resilient community. So through this work, we can increase community awareness and action related to the climate and increase the community's resilience to climate change. And one thing I do want to point out from this slide is that I mentioned our school programs. We did have over 2,000 students participate in school programs at MONOVA last year. We're on track to surpass that number this year. And I also want to mention that this school year alone, by December, we will have had over 300 students just through the archives. So the archives are, an active and engaged space of learning and research. And I think it's also interesting to note where schools are coming from. So, of course, the majority are coming from the city and district of North Vancouver. However, we are seeing an increase in school program visits from other areas of the Lower Mainland. If you see from Burnaby, New West, Surrey, Coquitlam, we are having schools coming from all over the Lower Mainland to learn at MONOVA, which I think speaks volumes about the work that we're doing. Enhancing transportation and mobility. I think this is an area where you might say, how can a museum and archives possibly help enhance transportation and mobility? So through archives, exhibits, and programs, we share the history of transportation in North Vancouver and how transportation has evolved over time to meet the needs of our growing community. That continues to be a topic of conversation, which is important today. And by sharing this history and creating opportunities for dialogue around transportation in North Vancouver, we can help facilitate those conversations around what the future transportation needs of our community might be. Through our programming, we explore sustainable and active transportation, thinking about what that looks like and the impacts these modes of transportation have on our community. And through awareness building, we can help increase the number of people walking, cycling, or taking transit rather than driving. I also want to mention that the Archives of North Vancouver have the opportunity to be an increasingly important community hub in close proximity to Lynn Valley Town Centre. Fostering a resilient organization. So the Museum of North Vancouver is an attraction for tourists and draws visitors to North Vancouver. You may or may not be aware, but MONOVA was actually featured in the New York Times article 36 Hours in Vancouver earlier this year. We were in fact the only museum mentioned in that article. And through a recent summer visitors survey, we learned that 75% of our summer visitors to the museum did come from outside of North Vancouver, and 35% were visiting from outside of Canada. So many of the visitors come to MONOVA as part of a cultural visit to the North Shore, and indicated that after visiting MONOVA, they were planning to visit other tourist destinations such as the Capilano Suspension Bridge or Grouse Mountain. So we are part of the economic tourist landscape in North Vancouver. In our museum store, we support local makers and small businesses. We host local artisan markets of local makers. We did generate over $65,000 in retail sales in our museum store last year, over $55,000 in venue rental income. And this year we did expand our retail presence and have a new store retail component at the archives as well that we're looking forward to continuing to expand. And we're continually working to increase and diversify MONOVA's funding sources through private philanthropy, corporate partnerships, grants, and earned revenue on top of the generous support we do receive from the City and District of North Vancouver. And finally, the work that we do, we cannot do in isolation. Of course, our partnerships are critical, both with the City and District of North Vancouver, with the Tsleil-Waututh and Squamish Nations through our Indigenous Voices Advisory Committee. We also work with the North Vancouver District Public Library, Capilano University, North Shore Rescue, North Shore Tourism Association, among others. And we look forward to continuing to expand our partnerships throughout North Vancouver and beyond. And I just, again, want to take the opportunity to thank the District of North Vancouver, Mayor and Council. Thank you all again for your support. We greatly appreciate it and appreciate the opportunity to continue with our work. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. And I do see some members of council. Councillor Back.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'll move receipt of the report.
Thank you very much. Is there a seconder on the matter? Councillor Murray, your second up. Thank you, Councillor Murray.
Thank you.
Councillor Back.
Thank you very much, Zoe, for coming and presenting tonight. And for the last almost 4 years, I've had the privilege of being the district council representative on the commission, and along with Councillor, I know Councillor Forbes was on the commission as well previous to me. It's been wonderful and for me to be able to see the evolution just over the last few years, because it's really been quite a transformation. And I just want to say how lucky we are to have Zoe leading the organization. I think she's doing an outstanding job from where she started, where the organization was when she started to where it is today. You've done a great job of just putting us on a positive track. And we also have a commission to thank for that, chaired by Dee Dollywall, our current chair. We also have, so many great connections to the organization, including the Friends of the Museum, which is the volunteer organization that puts so much into the organization as well. I think our museum is a wonderful example of what a community museum should look like today, the community we are. And I think it really does provide that place for many people to go and reflect on all aspects of our history, some of those aspects which may be uncomfortable, so that we can learn and look to the future. This, as you saw in Zoe's presentation, the diversity of the programs, I think, is really what is bringing this organization to life now that we're in this next phase with the museum open. It's really become such a welcoming space for everyone in our community, and it's great to see. I've attended a number of the events. When I started on the commission, I didn't have kids, and now I have 2 kids and have a whole new appreciation for the types of family programming that's offered there. I'm very excited about the next phase of the organization that's outlined in the strategic plan. I know how much work has gone into this, but things like just growing the types of temporary exhibits. We've done some, the organization has done some amazing exhibits, which has resulted in partnerships with groups like North Shore Rescue, which was mentioned among all the partners that you can see there. Types of new programs I'm excited to see, and new partnerships that'll grow both audiences and revenue, which are important. Also continuing to find ways for people to interact with the archives. it's a beautiful old building that's been there in Inland Valley for a very long time. And I want to continue to see how we can get more people through there. And I know Zoe has lots of ideas for how we're going to do that, as well as incorporating and showcasing MONOVA throughout the community in different ways. So finding ways to, perhaps incorporate it into wayfinding in some public spaces. But we have so much great archival content that lives at the archive. So getting that out even more into the community. I know, regularly we get the North Shore News publishes the archival photos, and I always love seeing those. But just want to thank you for your work in leading us into this next phase. And it's an exciting time for MONOVA. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Back. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Little, and thank you, Councillor Back, for representing us so well, and thank you for your presentation. We haven't seen MONOVA for a while here, and it's nice to know it's growing. It was an infant, and now it's a young adult. And we'll skip over the toddler stage because that's always a bit bumpy. Do I have my mic on? No, I don't. Meddy's mad at me right now. So it is a very exciting time. And I do think when we talk about the archives, I love the archives building. It's one of my favorite buildings. I love it. And I remember going in there and being fascinated by the phone books. Looking up my grandparents' phone number in the phone books. And now with these, this is how, young people look up a phone number. Those kinds of things, the old history and the old stories are so interesting. And so I hope we can find ways to bring more people into the archives too, because it's it's an important place. I really enjoyed your slide presentation. I'm very visual, so I like the visual part of it. I love the marketing with the cards. The look very consistent all the way through. I'm interested in looking at it. I want to read it. I want to go and look at it again. I know that there was a discussion about storytelling. And can you give me any indication as to where that is, or have you started sort of storytelling with different people in the community and talking to them and interviewing them about their history and the past? And
thank you very much for your question. Are you referring, storytelling can mean a number of different things in a museum and archives context. Are you thinking about like an oral history project?
Oral history, and we did talk about that a number of
Yes.
years ago. It was brought up, and it's something that intrigues me. I was actually talking to one of your neighbors, the owner of Think Tank next door, saying he should actually look at an oral history of his life growing up in North Vancouver, and bringing in his business to that history. But I did it with my father. I did a bit of an oral history, and I think you don't realize how important it is until those people are gone out of your lives, and wanting to all of a sudden ask them questions and they're not there to ask them. And so I do think it would be a really interesting process. And I'm just wondering if you are going to be embarking on something like that.
Sure, thanks again for the question. So we do currently have an oral history project that we've been working on with elders through the Squamish Nation and the Tsleil-Waututh Nation. So that's sort of I would say the beginning foray into the oral history project that we're working on. And it's something that we're looking at expanding, sort of looking at important figures in the history of the community. And also to your point, I think there, part of the work that we can do is looking at which oral stories are important for us to hold as the archives, but also how can we support members of the community and encourage them and help provide resources so that they can maybe create their own oral histories to keep for their family. So I think it's twofold. There is the part about our collection that we're building and what we're preserving as part of that cultural heritage, but just supporting people in the community and encouraging and providing some of the basis, the research, and the resources for them to do that for themselves.
I'm thinking about former Mayor Don Belle, former Councillor Belle, City Councillor Belle, former federal MP Belle, and the history that he has from a political perspective in this community, working for both the district and the city of North Van. But he's got an incredible memory. And I did actually mention to him too, I'm saying it to a lot of people, as we age, you start reflecting. And, I did say to him, I said, you've got to start telling some of these stories and these experiences that you've had over the years, because they are of great entrance and great importance to, the turns and twists that we as a municipality and local government have taken. So I look forward to that. And I'm going to keep on you about that, because it really is something near and dear to my heart. And then lastly, I guess it's always nice to have another venue. I love the gift store, by the way, and I'm glad you're showcasing local artists. But the venue that you have, I know we're having our volunteer appreciation evening at MONOVA next year. I think we've booked that with you to celebrate our volunteers. And so we look forward to coming down and partaking in that. But it is also great to be able to reach out to local businesses that don't have space and offer that space. And then they can, I enjoyed it the other day when we met, the city and the district met and had a lovely dinner down there. And I walked through and it was a very nice evening and I did enjoy it. So thank you very much for your work. Glad to have you aboard.
Thank you very
Thank you.
much.
Councillor Ma.
So we thank you for the presentation and the work that you're doing. And I do want to acknowledge Councillor Back's role on being our rep on your board, and Councillor Forbes for previously being the rep. The plan is good. It's great. And I recognize that there's a lot of collaboration with our First Nations on the North Shore. I think that's very positive. As you mentioned, you're trying to foster strong and diverse relationships. That's great. I also appreciate that in the actual plan, there are KPIs. So, we can track your progress and when you achieve the goals. Finally, I love that in addition to the school programs that, as you point out in the report, that 75% of the 2024 summer visitors were outside North Vancouver and 35% were international visitors. That's great that MONOVA is supporting our local tourism business. So as you mentioned, trying to support the district's goals. We have a lot of different goals. So it's great that MONOVA is a part of it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Very much. Councillor Hanson.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all the good work you've done with the museum, and thank you, Councillor Back, for your leadership role on behalf of the district and the museum. I wanted to note as well the awards that you've won: the 2023 Canadian Museum Association Standing Achievement Award and the New York Times 36 Hours in Vancouver, being the only featured museum in the metro area, which I thought, and I for one would like to see more publicity surround these significant attainments, and I think more people should know that these awards have been granted. Just focusing on the issue of financial capacity, and of course we're entering an era when money is tight all the way around, and governments and in households as well. Wonder if you could share with us a little bit about your thoughts on how to increase revenue streams. And also, is there anything the district can do to assist you in this? Councillor Murray talked about using your space in the way we did for the meeting with the other councils, city council. But are there any initiatives perhaps that the district could participate in assisting you in achieving a more diverse revenue stream? Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for your question. I think continuing to support us with the municipal grant in the way that you have is really important. That's obviously a huge piece of the puzzle for us. Beyond that, you mentioned some of the venue rentals. Being able to utilize our space for different district events is helpful. One of the pieces I did talk about, for us, it's incumbent upon us to continue growing and diversifying our revenue streams, and fundraising is really a big piece of that. I think we've really just scratched the surface of what's possible from a fundraising perspective. And so that's something that's in our, it comes through in our strategic plan. It's part of our, what we're looking at making more of an investment in next year is our resources to put towards building our fundraising capacity. And I think continuing, you mentioned the awards that we've won and wanting, that there can and should be more promotion of those aspects. the very first strategic priority for us is continuing to build awareness and brand recognition. So I think by being able to work with district, for example, communications teams looking for opportunities to collaborate and partner with different agency partners, and just to help continue sort of raising the profile of MONOVA and building that awareness in the community will help positively impact those results. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's one of those takes a village kind of situations where there's so many people who are contributing in, whether it's friends of museum, the staff, the advocates, and people who are coming into there to make it such a great place. I'm afraid that my most significant contribution is that they put padding up at head height on the streetcar so that, because I almost laid myself out walking into the 153 there. And so now there is, I believe it's a pool noodle to protect people as they walk into that space. So I'm glad to make my own contribution where I can. But I just wanted to say thank you very much for the update. It's always great for the council to hear from you and from your organization to be aware of the operations down there at the facility. We are trying to take advantage of that as a venue more frequently, and I think that it's really become a place that the community can be very proud of. So on behalf of the council, thank you very much for your presentation here today. Council, just on the business side of this, so I believe Councillor Back, you were the first, so that's moved and seconded. Any other discussion on the matter? Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you very much. And again, thank you, Councillor Back, for all your support through the commission. We appreciate it. Thank you.
All right, council, moving on with this evening's agenda. The next item up for consideration is 8.2. This is a development variance permit 23.24 for 3091 Royal Avenue. And we have a comment from staff. Yanzeng.
Yes, thank you. Your worship and members of council, I'll provide a brief overview of this application. So this application before you is involved subdividing the property into 2 new single-family homes while retaining the existing house on the site. And to be able to retain that existing house on the site, a minor backyard, rear yard setback relaxation is required. The required setback is 25 feet, and the existing building is at 24.25 feet. So it's 0.75 feet relaxation. So while this variance is quite minor because it's associated with a subdivision application currently under the development procedure bylaw, that council approval is still required as we do not have the delegated authority to approve variances related to subdivision applications. I will wanted to say a few factors have also played into the timeline of processing of this application. A changing proposal initially from a 4-lot subdivision now to a 2-lot subdivision, managing a permission regarding a removal of a shared tree with a neighbor, and also acceptable stormwater management and complication with the groundwater monitoring process. And then also deciding on, for the applicant, deciding on which option they wanted to proceed with the existing house, whether to have a variance or renovate their home. So in accordance with notification requirements, 20 notices were sent to neighboring properties regarding council's consideration of this variance, and no comments were received. And the results were provided to council in the agenda addendum circulated last Friday. So given the variance is quite minor and the approving officer is of the view that he or she will approve the subdivision should council approve the DBP, staff support this variance application. Thanks.
Very much. My own part, I find the variance to be very minor, so I will be supporting the staff recommendation. Is there a seconder for that?
Second.
Councillor Murray, thank you. You're top of the list. Yeah, like I said, it's a very, very minor variance, and so I support varying it so that the approving officer can carry about their business. Councillor Murray, additional comments?
Thank you, Mayor Little. I concur that it is a minor variance, and although we are going to be losing some trees, we are still able to maintain 33. Is that correct? That's correct. think 33 trees are going to be maintained. We're going to lose some, but some are of poor health. Yes, 33 trees. No district trees will be removed. 10 out of the 20 trees are designated. Is that, can staff just clarify that for me? It's a bit confusing.
Yes, I'm happy to clarify that. So there are 53 trees on site and adjacent road allowance. And then the application is proposing to retain 33 of them. So that's why there is no access off of, is it Kings?
Right.
East Kings, yeah. So, and then they're proposing to remove 20 trees on site. And then out of those 20 trees, only 10 of them are substantial size that are protected by bylaw. So under the 3-to-1 replacement ratio, they will need to provide 30 replacement trees. So they're able to locate about 16 site with a lot to the new lot that's going to be created, so that they have to pay cash in lieu for the remaining 14 trees.
So you can see how that paragraph is a little bit confusing. There's a lot of, so we have 53, and what are we going to have retained?
33.
33. Okay, that's all I want to know. And I guess my final comment would just be, I'm glad that the owners decided to move the house, keep one of the houses as opposed to putting it into the landfill, tearing down, and starting all over again. So I think that's a benefit. And, you know, I hope in these kinds of situations, more of that is in the future in regards to these redevelopments of these lots. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Miri. Councillor Ma.
Thank you, staff, for this report. I happened to drive by the house this weekend, and it's huge and a very unique site with its slope and how the neighboring parties kind of loop around there. As I mentioned, the lot size is, you know, almost 20,000 square feet. That's 45% of an acre, and so it's a good sized lot. And there's a lot of good information in the report. I note that the proposed subdivision complies with the OCP designation. And while there's a steep slope, the geotech report says this site is suitable for subdivision. And with reference to Councillor Murray, this proposal is compliant with the tree removal and replacement plan. So, you know, that's good. Or sorry, consistent with our urban tree canopy program. But most importantly, this, you know, if this variance is approved by council, it would be compliant with the zoning bylaw, and the approving officer would likely proceed with the review. As everyone's mentioned, this variance being sought is like 23 centimeters, I believe. It's like 9 inches. And I think back to my days at BC Housing when we were purchasing land and commission a land survey. For the most part, if the variance was less than 30 centimeters, we didn't really make too much fuss about it. You know, of course, taking in the big picture of what we planned there. So this leads me to, I looked up the Board of Variance and see how that could apply in this situation. And I note that the board generally does not deal with major variance applications. So I was just wondering about this. Is this not something that could have been dealt with by the Board of Variance?
Yeah, through the mayor. So BOV certainly has been a route that the applicant and staff have explored, and the Board of Variance in the end ruled that there is no undue hardship, because Board of Variance is a hardship board, and this is a newly created situation necessitated by the applicant's desire to subdivide the lot. So technically, it's not a hardship. So,
okay, just another question on that. You know, I realize with DAPR that the district's development approval process will be streamlined, and some decisions will be delegated to our trained staff. Is it potentially this type of variance could be also delegated? Is this something that's being considered?
Well, I will say that, if council feel comfortable with staff handling minor issues, those are minor delegated DVPs, and this I would consider minor. We can certainly explore that as part of DAPR
Yeah.
and report back.
I guess, the key from my point is this, moving forward with projects that, within a certain scope or something that staff can handle, it would save us having to have these come before council. Just some thought. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Ma. Councillor Hanson.
Yeah, thank you very much. My comments were much along the lines of Councillor Ryan. Obviously, I support the variance sought. We're talking about 9 inches over 20,000 square feet. It seems to me we have to be able to envision a way of getting through this more expeditiously and with less bureaucracy. I mean, from my point of view, it seems to me the approving officer could be given discretion when the variances are so insignificant. Those are my comments. I look forward to our considering how this could be, these types of very small non-conformities can be addressed in a more expeditious way. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Beck.
Sorry, I'll just add my support to the sentiment that both Councillors Ma and Hanson have already stated. I feel this is a very minor variance, and having it come forward to council in this way, it does extend the process, and I would think the cost to some degree for the applicant. And I think it's a very minor variance with next to no sort of opposition to. So I'm supportive, but I hope that we can change the process so that these sorts of variances won't have to come to council for much longer. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think a number of points I was going to raise have already been raised. So I have one question remaining. The 14 remaining trees, there's a cash in lieu contribution made, and the contribution will go to the district's urban tree canopy project. How much money is that for those 14 trees that are not actually going to be transplanted or replanted?
Have a response?
Your Worship, it's based on the fees and charges bylaw. So for any cedar tree or Douglas fir, it will be around 2,000, and for any trees that are not Douglas fir or cedar, it will be around 1,000, and it depends if they are. It will be determined through the environment department at the building permit stage. So the exact amount will be determined that time.
So we know that 14 trees are going, but we don't know which 14?
The applicant should provide the species and the locations exactly. So the environment department will be determined how many are, we have the arborist report showing the number of trees, which are cedar, Douglas, or hemlock. So with that calculations, we will see how much is not replanted, and those trees will have to be, the applicant has to pay. And these trees, considering they are on-site trees, it will go to canopy program, not the tree, DNV trees. The street trees.
Thank you. Is the pricing that you mentioned, the trees that are more natural to our environment are the ones that, like the Douglas, are the ones that will cost more in this kind of cash in lieu contribution?
If they are not planted. Yes, if they are cedar or Douglas fir, they have to pay more if they are not replanted.
Thank you very much.
Want to be clear on that. So then, sorry, did you say hemlocks are one of the species included?
Oh, I mentioned that based on the arborist report, we have three species that are removing on that side. There are hemlock, cedar trees, and Douglas fir on site. For the cedar and Douglas fir, the fees is more if they are not replanted, but for the hemlock, it's just less, you know, yeah.
We're happy to see the end of hemlocks there. Okay, thank you very much. I don't see any further speakers on the matter. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Great, thank you very much. Item 8.3 was passed on consent at the beginning of the meeting. So if you're here for that, that item has already been approved. Next up for discussion is item 8.4. This is the bylaws 8650 and 8651 OCP amendment and rezoning for a 23-unit stacked townhouse development at 1900 to 1950 Sandown Place. Sorry, Councillor Hanson, your name's up. You're moving the matter. Seconded by Councillor Muri. Councillor Hanson, this item is returning back from public hearing. And so it's first time for council to share their views on the matter. Councillor Hanson, your comments, please.
Thank you very much. We'll be supporting this rezoning. This proposal provides for the replacement of 3 single-family homes with 23 townhouse units. 3 of those units will have lock-off suites that can potentially create rental housing. I note that the proposal calls for a community amenity contribution of $371,000 that can be contributed to affordable housing and a development cost charge of $233,000. I know that we can all visualize uses for this site that we would like more rental housing, more affordable housing, less parking spaces and so forth. But at this stage, I believe this is the best that we're going to achieve for this site, and I will be voting in favor of the rezoning.
Thank you very much. Councillor Muri, your comments?
Nothing much further, just that it would be great if we could complete the west side of Capilano Road and finish this part of the community off. So thank you.
Thank you. Just my own comments on the matter. I'm also supportive. I find this to be generally in keeping with the character of the community around it, so I'll be supportive. Councillor Pope, your comments?
Thank you. Just one quick comment. I'm wondering if we can direct the CACs of, is it $340,000? 371 to the Affordable Housing Fund.
Just want a clarification, Mr. Daniluk, I believe everything that is in the CAC fund is at one point going to be wrapped up and directed towards ultimately, I think the suggestion was affordable housing. So do we need to individually do that all the way along the way, or is that something that's already contemplated in our plans?
Your worship, it's already being contemplated. There is a transition. There are projects in place that are also funded by CACs. So the intention is to transfer the remainder of the CACs to the Affordable Housing Fund.
It's already the plan to transfer it all to affordable housing.
I just wonder if we could make that formal though, just to ensure that that money is there and that it's, you know, accounted for. Is that easy to do?
Issue, Mr. Daniluk, or is that that's already happening anyway? So if we formalize it in a motion, does that cause any issues?
There is a little bit of uncertainty with what's in progress. I'd prefer not to at this point. Just because we have projects in progress, so there are CACs committed. We have to go through the year-end process. So
Guessing it's like a cash flow issue. There's certain things taking place in a certain order, and so you need to make sure there's enough funds set aside for other commitments.
That's correct. And the only intention there is to make sure that we follow through with commitments council has already made.
Okay. Okay. Just Mr. Stewart, maybe I can check in with you on that. Then it's understood that that's our intent, but have you been apprised of the concerns about being short cash on the projects that have been already committed to by the council?
I think it's just more a matter of an accounting process in the sense that we want to ensure that as we wrap up the year end, we've allocated those things where we've made commitments, and then the balance goes to the fund. So I think we understand that to be the wish and direction of council. And it's just we're at that bit of a shoulder season, so to speak, right now. But that's the intention as we go forward.
So the motion, I think, is in order. I don't have an issue with the motion being considered, but I think I've heard from the staff that they need a little bit of flexibility to round out the year's finances. So the motion is in order. If there's a seconder for the motion, seconded by Councillor Hanson, and my own comments on the matter, I worry about us tying the hands of staff entirely too much with the cost escalations that we're seeing and our ability to get projects complete. I know they're under tight conditions to fulfill other previous obligations that the council has committed to. And so the challenge is if we run out of funds for it, then, you know, it's a very tricky situation for our staff. So I won't be supportive of the motion, but it's been moved and seconded by Councillors Pope and Hanson. So, sorry, discussion on the motion. Sorry, Councillor Pope, you moved the motion. Do you want to have discussion on that specifically?
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so we actually have done this before. It's not without precedent in another property down in Lower Capilano, where we asked that $10 million be set aside and be directed to the Affordable Housing Fund. I'm wanting to ensure that everything possible is done to provide affordable housing and to make sure there's money there for it. And so I just want to reiterate that I think that this it shouldn't be this much of it shouldn't be a problem to just designate it as going into the Affordable Housing Fund if it's a community amenity funding.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Hanson, additional comments on the matter?
Not too many, except to say, I mean, in the next item, we're going to be looking at Belle Place. There's $1.9 million in community amenity contributions. And from my point of view, when I vote in favor of this type of development, one of the consolations is the fact that we are creating a community amenity constellation for affordable housing. So I think it's very appropriate that we give that direction. I mean, obviously, if there's no money there because it's being spent elsewhere, that's a different question. But from an accounting or administrative point of view, but I think it's more than appropriate that we give the direction that our intent is that that money from these community amenity contributions make their way to affordable housing.
Thank you. Councillor Ma, your comments on the matter?
Yes. There's a focus in this district. I agree with some comments that the mayor has made in terms of restricting our flexibility in using the funds for other purposes. We're building housing, but we're also really building complete communities, and that includes parkland, that includes trails. There's a whole bunch of other amenities that we need as well. And I think of another project where, you know, we're considering acquisition of land for parks, and those are just as important. I don't want to have to pick, I don't want to have to put all our eggs in one basket to say it's only housing. We need housing, but we also need to build complete communities. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Murray?
I think we need to have a further discussion about affordable housing, CACs, and the budget. I don't think it's appropriate to take up this very significant discussion in advance of more items on this agenda. That's not what we're talking about tonight. I'm not prepared to make a decision either way because I don't have all the information I need from staff, and I don't believe that staff were prepared to be able to talk to us about this tonight. You're not voting for it. I wish that we could just defer this. In fact, I'll make that motion that we refer this to a workshop or a subsequent evening where staff can advise us as to what these challenges are going forward. Would that be fair, Mr. Daniluk?
Actually, I'm going to have to check the clerk.
Okay.
So referral, deferral.
Tell me what to do, Genevieve.
Thank you, through your worship.
I would recommend that council, right now, currently, this is an amendment to the main motion. So if you refer this part of it, it refers second and third reading or defers consideration of second and third reading. I would we don't wanna do recommend, that. I would recommend that council dispose of the amendment, however appropriate, vote on second and third reading of the bylaws as in front of council right now, and a follow-up motion could be presented after second and third reading is Right, that would be more fair because we want to be able to pass this for the applicant and get this business going forward. And that I would just like a chance to have a discussion with staff to understand a little bit more about this and talk about this affordable housing fund and talk about how CACs are going to be directed in the future. So we don't have to do amendments on development application motions every single time they come forward. There's got to be a better way to do this.
Okay, so to be fair about what's in order, so then the recommendation from the clerk is that we address the issue that was in the printed package, and then we come back and consider an additional follow-up motion on the matter. I think that's reasonable in this situation, and so I'm prepared to, unless there's this further discussion on the original main motion.
Call the question.
Call the question on the original main motion. All those in favor? Contrary minded, motion is carried. Councillor Pope, you're reintroducing your motion as is, or do you have a different
I had a
recommendation?
deferral motion.
Well, hold on.
All right.
We had to dispense with it, so now we have to restart. Yeah. Is your microphone on, Councillor? Yeah.
Turned it off. I'd like to keep my original motion on the table to direct these funds to go to the Affordable Housing Fund.
Still seconded by Councillor Hanson. Okay. Let's assume we're still in the speaking order that we were in at that time. So Councillor Murray, you had the floor at that time. Do you have any additional comments on this motion?
Well, my comments would be that my finance staff and my CAO are saying that there's some issues in regards to the shoulder season, some commitments that we've made. I need to understand what those are. I'd be happy to put, I'd just be happy to build actual affordable housing. I'd be happy to do that and have a fund to help assist with that. But I have, our two senior executive team members telling us that we've made some commitments. I'd like to know what they are, why we're having this challenge. And we're coming up, as Councillor Hanson's pointed out, we've got another item coming up with 1.9 million. What do we do with that? So this is a bit of a clunky way to do it. And I think there should be a system in which these funds in the future are automatically directed rather than requiring a council motion in an amendment on a development application at second and third reading.
So to be clear, do you want to go back to your referral?
Oh, yeah, I'd like to refer it back to staff and a discussion with council.
Okay. And so is there a seconder on referral? Councillor Mott. Discussion on referral.
I have nothing else.
Councillor. No? Okay, any other comments on referral? Councillor Beck?
Thank you. Thanks, Mayor Little. I fully support the intent of Councillor Pope's comments. I also agree with a lot of the comments that have been made by others around the table. I don't think we should be deciding on CAC usage on an application by application basis. I think we need to have a policy. I believe affordable housing is at the top of what our community needs, but I recognize that there are other things that we need to be able to pay for as well. And just hearing that there's a bigger conversation that we have to have, and so that we're not having to decide, as an agenda comes on and an item comes on an agenda.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, do you have additional comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, I have a couple of issues in that if you've ever been involved with accounting and year-end accounting, if we just, I don't like the idea of the specific full dollar value that's mentioned in the report gets a motion that puts it forward to the affordable housing, which I'm all in favor for and I want to build tons of. But there are other costs that I know that finance is trying to juggle. I know that our budget is extremely tight, tighter than it's probably ever been. And so I trust staff that if the CAO and the finance department advises us that they need to do a little bit of wiggle room for just another month and a half, and they get the final numbers, we're only talking a month and a half, then I won't agree to this motion.
Okay, so just before we carry on, we've had some clarifying comments from the clerk here. At our July 22nd regular meeting of council, council actually already passed that Glenaire, the 1915 to 1987 Glenaire and 1974 to 1990 Belle Isle would be that their CACs would be directed to the Affordable Housing
Oh.
Fund upon successful completion of second and third reading. Yeah. Okay, but 1974 to 1990. 0.5. Okay, so there you go. So the items items under consideration for 8.5 have already been forwarded into the fund because at the time we did first reading, we gave direction on directing the CACs to the fund. That's your understanding, Mr. Daniluk, on that one? Okay, so then on the issue of 8.4, then at this point we have a referral motion from Councillor Muri to return the item back to staff. That's your understanding? Thank you very much. Okay, so back on referral. Any other comments?
Referral or deferral?
Refer.
Sorry.
We're debating the matter, so it's referral.
Okay.
Okay, I see no further speakers on the matter. So on the question of referring the item back to staff, all those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried with councillors Pope and Hanson opposed. Okay, so this item is referred back to staff. Next item up for discussion is item 8.5. This is bylaws 8672 and 8673 OCP amendment and rezoning for revised application for 104 unit townhouse development at 1915 to 1987 Glenaire Drive and 1974 to 1990 Belle Isle Place. And as I just said, just for your reminders, the CACs are already directed towards the Affordable Housing Fund on this particular item. This item is returning from a public hearing, and so the matter is up for second and third for discussion by the council. Councillor Hanson, you have a motion?
Yeah, I move the staff recommendation and the rezoning.
Is there a seconder on the recommendation? Second by Councillor Ma. Councillor Hanson, your comments, please.
Yeah, thank you very much. And much like the last application, I'm pleased to support this rezoning. It calls for the converting of 10 single-family homes to 104 townhomes. The townhomes will range 31 one-bedroom, 7 two-bedroom, and 32 three-bedroom, with 14 three-bedrooms, and 14 of the three-bedroom suites will have block-offs. The project will command 1.9 million in community amenity contributions, and by vote of this council, as has been clarified, that will be entirely dedicated to affordable housing. So we can contemplate, as we approve this rezoning, the amount of affordable housing that we will be able to create through that investment of $1.9 million. I note that all of the speakers at the public hearing were overwhelmingly in support of the proposal. Proposal calls for 173 parking spaces. Much as I said with respect to the last rezoning, many of us would like to see more rental, more affordability, less parking for vehicles in a place that's so well serviced by transit. However, at this stage, based on all my experience at this council table, I have come to believe that this is in fact the best that we're going to achieve for this site, and I will vote in favor.
Thank you very much, Councillor Hanson. Councillor Ma, as a seconder, do you have additional comments?
Just a few. I also found that most feedback, both written and in person, were supportive. So overall, I continue to support this townhouse project. It'll provide additional housing in the town center, which is critical, and it also fits the area plan. And I also know that this project is tied back to another project, the Ebb and Flow, which council approved back in March 2018. And to me, this is finishing off some work that was started before. So I continue to support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I see no further speakers on the matter. Prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried.
I can't help but point out that we spent 25 minutes on a 75-foot
All right. Okay.
variance.
Okay. The next item up for discussion is item 8.6. This is the 2024 to 2028 financial plan amendment number 2. Mr. Daniluk, your comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. The financial plan is typically amended each spring and fall to reflect changes occurring over the course of the year, including revisions to estimates, timing of work, and the recognition of external funding and obligations. The most significant change included in this amendment is the transfer of community amenity contributions to the housing reserve to the housing reserve fund to align with the new provincial housing legislation and reflect council's commitment to affordable housing projects. This transfer, I know we were just talking about the affordable housing reserve fund and these types of transfers. This is a movement of $18 million, and the majority of that fund set aside for the specific purpose to support council's commitments to affordable housing. There's a remainder that's left in the fund to help us through this transition period that we're in, which is what's making me nervous about making all these other commitments right now. We need to go through the year-end process and make sure we can fund our other obligations. So that's the most significant item included in the amendment. We also have the estimated response costs for the October 19th atmospheric river event, and that's brought into the plan, and most of these costs are expected to be funded by the province. The financial plan amendment was reviewed with the Finance and Audit Committee briefly last Thursday, and staff are available to answer any questions council may have.
Thank you very much, Mr. Daniluk. Next, Councillor Hanson, you're still up. Is that from the item before? Okay, Councillor Murray, your comments or your?
I'll move it. Can you give us an indication of the rest of the money that we're? I'll move it. I'll move it.
Is there a seconder on the matter? I'll second the matter. Councillor Murray, go ahead.
Just in regards to what we were just talking about the affordable housing fund. So 18 million is being shifted in, and there is a balance there.
Through your worship, Councillor Murray, there's a balance outstanding to be collected.
Right.
There's also a residual balance in the funds right now. We'd have to update the forecast to see exactly what it is at this point in time.
Okay.
That's a few $1 million that we have available.
So the vast majority is being transferred into.
Exactly.
And what's the total amount in the account for affordable housing? Do we have that number or no?
It's over 20 million, if I'm not mistaken.
Okay. Okay. Okay, thank you. Yes, it's been certainly, as Councillor Forbes, who's the most skilled in looking at these budgets, points out, there's all sorts of scenarios that we don't contemplate within a budget year or at any time during the year, such as this atmospheric river that we have just experienced. It's been an incredible impact to our staff and our organization, and future impacts on costs and how we're going to be able to deal with them. And I think that that's what a municipal budget is about. It is a moving, like an official community plan. It's a living, breathing document. It's moving and it's changing all the time based on circumstances. And so we always have to remember that, because I often hear, why didn't we do this when we said we were going to do it? Because of scenarios like the ones we've just experienced. Everything is changing constantly, and we have to be able to respond to it, because sadly, there are priorities that have to bump scenarios to the side. Ones like this very significant atmospheric river that we did not expect to impact us as it did. We have significant issues that we're going to have to face in areas such as woodlands, and we're going to have to put systems in place to be able to prepare for the next one, and that all costs money. So I appreciate the work that finance does for us, and I feel we're in good hands. And I'll look forward to that discussion in regards to CACs and how we can make it a policy rather than, whatever we were trying to do earlier. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. Not much to add. Not much else to add. We considered the matter at Finance and Audit this last week, and we're supportive of it. So these are all planned adjustments to the process, and so we'll be supportive. Councillor Ma, your comments?
As mentioned, this was brought up at the Finance and Audit Committee meeting. But when I read this report, there was one thing that struck me, and you don't have a lot of details on it. So I was wondering if staff could provide some details at another time, but it talks about a D&D hall renewal project. So if you can send some information on that, like.
Mr. Daniluk?
Sorry, I missed that.
On page 3, existing capital civic functions or civic facilities, it talks about the timing of a D&V hall renewal project. So this is the first time I've heard of that.
Through your worship, Councillor Mala, that's just a recasting of when those costs will be incurred. And best available information was they'll be incurred into 2025 instead of originally as planned in 2024. So we're just trying to manage the budget a little bit tighter in these days when things are so tight.
I think Councillor.
What's the
Miles
scope of the
wondering
project?
Scope of the project.
Sorry?
Project. What does the work entail? Mr. Stewart.
At this point, it really is focused on understanding what the condition of the hall is, what has to be fixed or not fixed. And as we continue to experience growth, at what point do we look at what the options might be to address that growth, whether that's 5 years down the road or 10 years down the road? So this is just sort of a scoping exercise right now that will come back to council once we have the data.
From my perspective, based on my limited knowledge of building conditions, I mean, one would probably start with an FCI report. That would probably help guide timing. Facility condition index report.
Ms. Chevalier? Yeah.
Through your worship, thank you for the question. We do have an FCI report for the hall, and actually for all of our buildings. So we've got good data on the age of all of the systems and so on. At the hall here, there are a number of systems that are coming due.
Okay.
And so this project is really just looking at those renewals and starting to plan for them. And at the same time, taking a look at whether there's other functional changes that are needed before we have a firm scope. So we're very early on in the project. And I think this recasting actually here is causing a pause to allow us to do that additional work to make sure that we understand if there's functional requirements before embarking on major renewals. So it's in an early scoping stage.
Thank you.
Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just with regards to the provision for a response to the atmospheric river event on October 19th, as we look to the future, how are we going to manage the costs associated with climate change? Because we're going to see more events like October 19th, maybe next year, maybe the following year. And I think it was just one of those events that many of us had never really seen up close like that. And it's just a big question, but how do we budget for responding to these types of events in the future? How do we plan for that? And I know in the report, we're going to be looking to the Emergency and Disaster Management Act and compensation, but what's the plan, bigger term plan in terms of how we respond to major events like that?
Mr. Stewart.
Yeah, we have a pretty significant exercise that we're going to be doing between now and February, looking at what the learnings, looking at what the learnings were with respect to this, because we are anticipating that this is going to be a more frequent experience, and therefore we really need to plan differently than we have in the past. Whereas, I've heard different accounts that it could be a 1 in 100 or a 1 in 200, and Gavin will tell me it's probably a 1 in 20 from now on. So we're going to have to shift our thinking quite substantially. But as I say, we have a fairly rigorous review of what occurred and what we need to do to make sure that we're ready for these events in the future.
Well, that's good. And I look forward to hearing the results of that review, because I think the community's eyes are open to how these events are going to be more frequent and more severe. And they want to know that we have a plan for how we respond and who pays. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Pope.
Thank you. Just picking up on that, I concur with Councillor Back that we are going to be facing huge increases in climate change. The costs for mitigation and remediation are going to escalate year over year. And I would like to see some sort of report on how we're going to manage that. It sounds like that's coming after you go through this exercise of reviewing where we're at with.
We have created a small team, and then we've got a participation throughout the organization so that we're not going to miss anything. And then there'll be a report that comes back to council for consideration.
And will there be numbers on that, or do you expect that you'll put a number on it, which is hard to do? I know.
Yeah, it's really early right now, but that would be our hope, is that we could say, okay, if we need to take these kinds of steps in the ballpark, this is the kind of money that it's going to take to address it. And then how does that fit into the budget generally?
Okay, thank you for that answer. So also I am really on a big picture level, wondering with these amendments, what is new here in terms of deferring and or delaying projects? Can you highlight that for me?
Apologies, can you repeat the question?
Oh, sorry. Should I do it into here or? Okay. What is new in this amendment that is in terms of deferring or delaying things that were in the budget earlier this year?
Through your worship, Councillor Pope, there's two main deferrals included in the budget: the work on the hall and work on one of the transportation projects. It's just a timing 1 year deferral.
So which ones are facing a 1 year deferral?
The hall project.
Yes.
And there's a transportation. It's the hall project, and there's an item under transportation as well.
What's the item under transportation, I think is the question.
I'm just looking it up. It's Marine Drive eastbound cycling project.
Right.
1 year timing.
So are any other, for example, the Handsworth ATF or any other ATFs or projects being deferred?
Not in this financial plan. We'll have to come back to council soon to provide an update on next year's 5-year plan, to have a discussion on deferrals.
Okay, thank you for that. And I was also curious why the one of the changes, number 4 on page 153, is why is the atmospheric river event, which is estimated, I guess, at 1.5 million, why is that falling under protective services budget?
Through your worship, Councillor Pope, under protective services, we have police protection, fire and rescue, and emergency management. The emergency management response falls under that category of cost.
I see. So that's where we'd find it in the budget. Okay, which raises another question. I'm curious about where we'd find in the budget. If someone on staff, say, for example, a director was fired from the DNV without cause, where would that severance show up in the budget?
Through your worship, Councillor Pope.
Councillor, I want to be very
I'm just
careful here.
Pointing out an example, like just for example, if somebody was fired,
Yeah.
where would that show up in the budget? Where would that
we
severance?
can get that response to you after the meeting, and we'll get a response back to you about that. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, next speaker is Councillor Murion.
Thank you. Just on the backs of, pardon the pun, on Councillor Back's comment, in regards to mitigation, I can't help but, bring forward an example. I know you were in Lynn Valley during that atmospheric river, and the mayor and I were down at Deep Cove, and it was amazing to see our new culverts working once they were unclogged. And we had a backhoe that was next to the culvert and a crew. And as soon as they pulled the debris out of the culvert, the water turned off like a tap. And so, you know, some of the, we always think in terms of how can we engineer ourselves out of these very chaotic situations that we find ourselves in. And quite simply, I think the future is going to be simple. When an atmospheric, I can't even say it anymore, atmospheric river is predicted, and certainly the prediction of Environment Canada was a third of the rainfall that we actually got. So that's issue number one. But, you know, quite simply, I believe the future in many events is going to be putting a backhoe down to within a reach of our problematic culverts, ones that we know are breached, you know, regularly, and having an operator on standby so they can simply go and clean it out. That was one of the biggest issues that we had was, you know, debris coming down those creeks because the water was, you know, inflating the mountainside, and you're not able to manage those slides. And so I think there's going to be some simple solutions, and I think there's going to be some more complex solutions and more expensive solutions, but it's going to be that very out of the box thinking. I remember Steve Ono was one of, for those, you know, that don't know, he was one of our former engineers. And I remember he came into a meeting one evening and said, we can't beat Mother Nature anymore. We can't engineer ourselves out of climate change. We just have to be creative and think outside the box, and you know, and manage it as best we can. And I think residents too, if this wasn't a wake-up call to be prepared for an event, whether it be weather or an earthquake, you know, I really think that we need to do more work in regards to getting our residents ready and have them recognize that they're going to be on their own for a while. We're not going to be, the cavalry is not coming. It's going to be very, very challenging. But I'm always proud of our community in the event of some sort of catastrophe. They come together so incredibly well and work together and help out. So I look forward to those discussions and how we're going to address this.
Thank you very much. You know, on the question of emergency preparedness for future rain events and climate change incidences, it's hard to say what our response will be when, unfortunately, in this example, the predictive services that we have suggested that it was going to be 120 millimeter to 160 millimeter event. It ended up being 344 millimeters of rain on Hastings Creek in Lynn Valley. And so had we been warned that this was going to be an extraordinary 100-year storm, and you know, even just that broadly to the community, then we would have been able to do different things. And if they could obviously be predictive to the point that they could say, oh, well, it's probably going to be Lynn Valley, it's probably going to be the eastern part of the district, or as specific as it can be, there's a lot more you can do. The problem is when it is less than half, the prediction is less than half the volume of rain that we got, it's very hard to say what could or would be done differently in terms of the in-the-moment response. Obviously, over the medium and long term, you're going to make sure that your infrastructure is set up to handle more significant rain events. And we've been doing that. We've done that with significant investments at McKay Creek, at Gallant Creek, and we're going to have to continue to do that. But it's that predictive piece that makes all the difference in the world. If we are told that it's an extraordinary event, of course, we'll put the resources in place to make sure that there's the ability to clear up catch basins on the fly. And that really was the biggest issue here, was that the rain was coming down at such a fast rate in the middle of the day on the Saturday that even though the catch basin did its job absolutely properly, Gallant Creek still overflowed, and Kilmer Creek still had issues of overflowing. It was just the rate that the rain was coming down. But again, those predictive models are critically important to our ability to customize our response to the event.
But they're not accurate. That's the problem.
Your worship, one of the learnings we have so far is that some of our systems are not as useful as we would like them to be. And so we're actually, one of the things we're doing right now is starting to create a interactive map that which we can then track what's happening live, as opposed to getting reports out in the field, and there may be some time lag in terms of how quickly they can be dealt with.
Great. Thank you very much. See no further speakers on the matter. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Okay, following up on that, so we now have the annual review of fees and charges, item 8.7. Again, looking to finance to open up some comments on this matter. Mr. Daniluk.
Thank you, Your Worship. The annual review of fees for equity and.
The microphone on?
There you go. Thank you, Your Worship. The annual review of fees for equity and cost recovery is conducted in alignment with best practices. All fees have been reviewed and adjusted in line with the target increase of 5%. Table 1 on page 8 of the report provides a list of exceptions to the 5% increase, including fees with a 0% increase as we're already recovering related costs, fees increasing above the 5% target to bring the district fees in line with the region or to recover increasing service costs. And there's a few other items of note. For pay parking, for example, the residential pass remains unchanged at $10, and a review of pay parking rates will be brought back as part of the parking strategy. There are fees for outdoor recreation and sport facilities that are under review, with policy and recommendations scheduled to come back to council next summer. And there's the congestion and curbside management permit that's also under review and will be brought back to council before next summer. Table 2 provides a schedule of proposed new fees, and Table 3 is a schedule of deleted fees. And with that, our staff are available to answer any questions council might have.
Okay, thank you. I'll be moving the staff recommendation. Is there a second on the matter? Second by Councillor Forbes. Just my comments. We considered the matter at Finance and Audit this last week, and the challenge is, well, it's a very good problem to have, in that we're going to see hopefully CPI and interest rates come down over the next little bit because inflation is cooling a little bit. And so the hope is that we'll be able to get back to smaller percentage increases in the very near future. There is a bit of a lag, though, in that on the front end of the big increase that we saw, the fees and charges did not go up with CPI at that time. Mm-hmm. And so where it's left us is a little bit behind, a little bit of a lag built into it. And so these are the recommendations to get us back in line with where we were historically in terms of the ratio of charges. So I'll be supportive of the staff recommendation. Second on the matter is Councillor Murray, is that right? Oh, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Forbes.
I think you've said everything. This went through the Finance and Audit Committee, and we looked at this, and the 5% is to kind of pick up where we didn't pick up. And the hope is that that will go down going forward as interest rates lower. Also, the other charges that are a little bit up was to get us, if I'm correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Daniluk, was basically to get us to sort of the standard in the area, competing municipalities, to have us all sort of on the same, or as close as possible to the same playing field as far as fees go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Murray.
I'm always a bit sensitive of increases to the fees and charges, because it's like the cost of gas or the cost of broccoli, or, the cost of, just about everything. And even though it's, an incremental increase, it's all cumulative at the end of the day. I am interested in having some clarification on the expansion of using credit cards to pay for property taxes. That will be new. Mm-hmm. And I guess I might have a little bit of a problem with that. There's probably credit card debt in this country is at an all-time high. To add, large amounts like, $10,000 to a credit card to pay property taxes. You know, do other municipalities allow that? They do. Yeah, I guess I'm reflecting on why we never allowed casinos to come into our community, because we didn't want to deal with the issues in regards to addiction, of gambling addiction, and the issues that come with them. And I don't know why I'm using that as a comparable, but I guess it's just, you know, it's a large amount, and I get that there's some pressures right now. And so I guess I do have a bit of a concern about that, but I will heed to the Finance and Audit Committee and your expertise. But I do think we have to always remember that we have to really remain living within our means. We say that, but you know, the practice is sometimes challenging. The implementation of living within one's means is often very challenging because there's so many variables, and there's a lot of balls up in the air with everything, and I get it. But I'm hearing Councillor Mackay-Dunn right now, must, want, should. And I really think that is a measurement of how we proceed going forward. Things are not going to get easier, people. Things are not going to be getting easier. They're going to become more complex and more expensive and more challenging. And I really need to, I think we need to ask ourselves, when is the ceiling going to crack? And because the train is going down that track, and I think there's some parts falling off it right now. So anyway, I know that I'm equally as concerned with the fees and charges with the Rec Commission, and all the other fees and charges that get added on to us as human beings and families and societies. And I really think that we need to pay close attention and make sure that we're addressing our community's needs up against this very challenging time.
I think Mr. Daniluk had some additional information on that. Wasn't the credit card, wasn't that the business community that was really seeking out the credit card option? And I think we also were going to make it extremely clear that how much you were going to be charged on the front end of the purchase. I don't know, Mr. Daniluk, do you have some additional comments on that?
Yes, Your Worship, the original request did come through the business community in terms of permits and licenses and such. And when the matter was explored further, staff took note about how it was being applied in other communities in the Lower Mainland and brought back the credit card fee as a convenience fee, generally set to recover our costs.
And then but it's open to anybody that wants to pay their property taxes. Okay. Okay.
Thank you. Councillor Ma.
Thank you. This following up on that point, because during the Finance and Audit Committee, I wanted clarification on this as well. If someone, and I just looking for confirmation from Mr. Daniluk, if someone chooses, so this is about giving options. If someone chooses to pay by their property taxes with their credit card, they will be assessed an additional 2.4%.
2.2.
2.2. Yeah. So it's giving them a convenience, but they're also having to pay, because we don't want to lose out on that transaction fee too, right? So it's going to be challenging, But similar points have been mentioned. Increases or in fees and costs are kind of unfortunately unavoidable as the district faces cost pressures. And as much as possible, I think the guiding principles are in place. User pays. And as I said, as much as possible, growth pays for growth. I mean, look at the CACs that are being contributed on some of the projects that we talked about earlier. And then at the same time, public services, which our residents pay for, we got to make sure we, as you say, Councillor Murray, live within our means and try to find that balance between providing a level of service, but also making sure that we cover off the costs responsibly. It's challenging times, and sitting in on the Finance and Audit Committee meetings and talking with staff in detail, it's a lot of work, and I think staff have done a good job So Rick, if you can pass that back to the staff, thank them for their work, that'd be great. Thank you.
And to your point, Councillor, I will just say that if they miss the deadline by 1 day, it's a 5% penalty. And so the 2.2 as an option to get it paid and get clear is actually lower than if they miss it by a day. So it does provide an option for some people in some circumstances that may make sense. Councillor Miri.
I just want to add one more thing in regards to film liaison, and I'm just looking for it. It's here. Hold on. Where is it? So, licensing and film. And I would just say that's another variable too. The film industry is experiencing some bumps right now, some significant bumps. The recent, the NDP had committed I think it was a 34% or 35% tax credit. And because they are feeling the leaving of a lot of the production companies to Europe, Ireland, England, and that's a huge economic driver in British Columbia, the film industry, and we've always been very, very supportive of it. And so as we're adding, we need to remember those organizations and groups that are in precarious situations right now. I think there's been a significant decline in the number of pilots that have come into the area. Because they're getting incentives from other places around the world, and the film industry is taking them. Film and television industry is taking them. So we always have to be very cognizant of each one of these increases and remember who we're impacting. It's not the same brush across the board. It's not that everybody's just paying. Some people are hurting, and some businesses are hurting. We have to make sure we're very clear on that, and that we, that we allow information to come forward by our film department, for instance, or other departments that impact these things. I'm glad I would be interested going forward as we're looking at parking at tourist destinations and what they charge in parking. I note that we've got a temporary use application for one of our big major attractions in the district. And I'll be interested to know what that system for them will look like if indeed they're successful.
Thank you. See no further speakers on the matter. Prepared to call the question. All in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried. Okay, next item up for discussion is item 8.8. This is the replacement of environmental fee with environmental levy. And Mr. Daniluk, do you have any comments on the matter?
Your worship, yes, the current environmental fee supports waste management services within the public realm, as well as waste reduction initiatives. Changing the environmental fee to an environmental levy corrects an inequity within the current fee structure by ensuring all properties benefiting from the services contribute to paying for them.
I'll be supportive of the recommendation on this. Thank you, Councilor Mayor. Second, okay, just my comments on it. I'm not indifferent to how much of a bit of a surprise cost this is going to be to some businesses. And so there's no question in my mind that businesses should be contributing to an environmental levy in the same way that residential groups will be. But I guess I'm looking to you, Mr. Daniluk, to assure me that we've been communicating with our businesses, or that, and also I guess the issue is we have some of the more significant landowners. This could be a very large number. Can you give me an example of, say, our largest tax folio? What is this environmental fee actually going to be on our largest tax folio approximately?
Thank you, Your Worship. The largest fee would be in the range of $31,000.
Okay. So our largest business folio would be $31,000 by this move, but it is something that we expect residences to pay. And so this is moving it across all classes. Have we been communicating through our business rep, through Neonella, or through the chamber that this proposed change?
We have been in discussion with Neonella, and we'll be advising the business community about the upcoming change.
When will it take place?
I'm sorry.
When will it take place? Or the 2025
Prior.
tax?
Yeah, prior to the,
Well, it'll be the 2024 tax year that you pay in 2025. Is that correct?
that's correct.
Thank you. Councilor Muri, your comments?
Well, so we're gonna approve it and then tell everybody?
Mr. Daniluk?
Might have I think I might have a bit of a problem with that one. Given the situation that we're in with the sewage treatment plant, given the situation we're in with everything right now, I'm not sure if, I get that we all have to contribute. I appreciate that. I'm just not sure that, I don't want surprises. I've had enough of them actually lately. I don't want any more surprises. So I think there needs to be an understanding that there's a clarity among the business community that's going to be hit as this hard. I think we owe them, I think we need to talk to them and let them know that this is coming, not approve it and then tell them later. Based on just the comment you just made, have we been talking to our community? We have not, apparently. We have not been talking to them.
Mr. Daniluk, additional comments?
Some additional comments on that. I mean, this environmental levy has been charged to residents only for years.
But not to the business.
And not to
the other classes.
Not to the other classes. So we're correcting this in equity. The median business would be charged $76. The residential class would be charged $33 per unit. So
and those big businesses, can you give some examples of what those big businesses you're talking about that are going to pay 30?
Well, when it comes to the one that I mentioned, these are the key players in the industrial class.
Yeah, I knew it.
Yeah. So.
Okay. Councilor Muri?
I'm thinking.
I don't have another speaker lined up. Councilor Hanson, saved your bacon. There you go. All right, Councilor Hanson.
Yeah, I support the staff recommendation. I appreciate the fact that these charges are going to come to businesses, but there's no reason why a business should think that they should escape a charge that a residential taxpayer has been paying. It really is just correcting an inequity, and I'm going to vote in favor.
I'm back.
Councilor Muri?
I thought.
Yeah.
I agree with that. I totally agree with that. But if we're going to say that we're going to converse with the businesses and bring them, let them know before we vote on them, that's the problem I'm having. I think we should go out to the business community and say, this is an inequity. Our residents have been paying this. You need to pay this too. Please prepare, instead of we're passing something and then we're going to let you know. It is the right direct thing to do, but I just think the process. So if you can elaborate on the process.
Mr. Daniluk.
Through your worship, Councilor Muri, I would suggest the main focus for the business community would be the tax distribution workshop and updating the property tax strategy, including addressing how competitive we are within the light industrial class. Class 5 was one of the issues that we were aiming at addressing last year through the tax distribution workshop. So I think that would be the larger focus for the business community, but I don't disagree that communicating this environmental levy, even though it's a small charge and it's a fair charge, it's something that we will make sure that we provide information to the business community on.
I think one of the other points too is that residential homes get solid waste pickup. We get somebody coming to our door once a week and picking up our garbage. Whereas many of the business community, they have private contractors. They don't have a municipal service coming to pick them up unless they contract with us under our own commercial fleet. So, this is a tax that they're having to pay because it's fair, because everybody else pays for it, but they don't get the same service. Just like the industrial users have said, they pay. We've been beholden to them because they pay these huge taxes, but they use very little services within their class and within the neighborhoods that they exist. And they've said that for many, many years. That has been a constant comment, that the services that they consume are not the same as the other classes. And so I would say that the same thing is in regards to this. And, you know, I just think that we are not the greatest at communicating sometimes. And as long as it works for us, that's good, as long as we see it as equitable and fair. And I understand the premise to that. But there is a responsibility to us to communicate to the business community, just like we communicate with our residents.
Mr. Stewart, additional comments?
It's really a question to Mr. Daniluk in terms of, I think what Councillor Murray is getting at is the timing of this. And does it have to go for the 2025 taxation year, or is it this is something that we should actually be doing some more consultation and then looking at it for 2026? So I just, maybe you could comment on that.
Mr. Daniluk, or I guess that's really a council decision on that, but Mr. Daniluk, we are giving them about 6 or 7 months notice. Is that adequate to give warning? I think I heard you say that the median business would pay about $76 or something like that. Can you, it's really only the extreme case that would be in the multiple $1,000s.
That's true. And so with the median business in the range of about double the average resident, and a limited number of businesses at the extreme level, but proportionately it's the same amount as the others. In terms of Mr. Stewart's question about timing for this budget year and how that might impact future decisions, it does simplify the way that we plan for this waste management service, and it does deal with that specific equity issue, and perhaps might provide us some flexibility to dealing with the other equity issue that we need to deal with through the Class 5. So I would like to see it proceed for those reasons.
Councillor Hanson?
Yeah. My comment, how's this going to, I noticed that industrial non-capped is on this table. How's this going to apply to industrial cap?
Through your worship, Councillor Hanson, we continue to have those conversations with the province about revisiting the cap properties. Cap properties are capped at a rate, and so they would not be. No, they would not have to pay it. So, no, but we continue those conversations with the province now that we're into the post-election period.
Am I allowed to ask who's the largest folio that will be impacted by it then?
The largest folio within the non-capped class?
Yes.
Chemtrade, I believe. Yeah.
And what about institutional class properties? You say all classes, but it doesn't, we don't, Capilano University is not going to get a big bill from this or something like that? Or are they included in it too?
They should be included with all the other classes. Yeah.
Okay. Councillor Back.
Thank you. And just listening to the comments around the table, and I'm also sensitive to adding any kind of new fee to especially small businesses right now. I do understand that this is a fairness issue, but it is a new, as far as a business owner is concerned, it's a new fee that they're going to have to pay. Now, when we could consult all we want, and I don't know how many business owners are going to say, yeah, sure, I'll support that. That's fair. They might not see it that way, but I do tend to agree that I think we could take one additional step to engage with them and just let them know that this is something that we're considering before we decide to affect the entire, every class. I'd like to have a little bit more, engagement with the businesses on this.
I think I have a level of discomfort with this.
Me too.
Without us having a discussion with Neonilla and the chamber and talking about the impact of this before we implement it. And so I think I'm going to recommend that we defer this item. Don't defer very much, but this one seems to have a big missing comms piece. And so I'm going to, I'll be moving deferral. Okay. To Mr. Daniluk, when would we need to make a decision for it to impact 2025 if we decide that that's a priority?
We have the utility rate bylaws coming forward December 2nd, and the environmental fee is included in that bylaw. So the decision is tonight or it goes to 2026.
Okay, I'm going to defer the item back to staff for further consultation, and we may have to amend it going forward, but I don't think we've met the test on this now. Okay, any other discussion on deferral? Call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is carried with Councillors Hanson and Forbes opposed. And yeah. Okay. Item 8.9 was passed at the beginning of the meeting through our consent agenda. So if you're here for that item, we have already passed it. And so the last item up for our consideration in the regular part of the agenda is Councillor Pope's motion, which is partnership with churches and faith-based groups for affordable housing. Councillor Pope, it's your report and your motion. Can you introduce it? And then I'll seek a seconder right away.
The motion is to direct staff to report back on opportunities to facilitate places of worship to redevelop as mixed-use sites to support affordable housing needs and the growing and diverse population of the District of North Vancouver.
Is there a seconder on the matter? Councillor Back. Councillor Pope, your comments, please.
Thank you. On Friday, the vulnerable people living in the Travelodge received an eviction notice. They're getting kicked out January 15th. So predictably, we will have more homeless people on the street. 70-year-old Deborah Buxton, who shared her story with council a number of months ago, is one of them. She told me this weekend that she's now making plans to live in her car. Again, we are reminded of how precarious life is for the unhoused and the vulnerable in our community, and it requires urgent attention by this council. Now, my motion to build transitional housing for the unhoused is in process. The motion we have before us today is another baby step forward in solving the vexing and escalating problem of affordable housing. This got on my radar when I was campaigning during the election and happened to knock on the door of a priest living in Edgemont. He told me that his church, in a search for new creative ways to find funding and keep the church alive, had been turned down by the district when it tried to build a couple of units of social housing on its property. Recently, the City of Vancouver and Councillor Rebecca Bly put forward a similar motion to this one that addresses this issue. So this motion is modeled on that. The goal is to help streamline the process for faith groups who want to develop some of their land for affordable housing. This concept is not without precedent. In 2014, the district rezoned the Lynn Valley Church property, and it was then able to build a new church, daycare, accessible units, and stratas, which funded the development. It's also been done on a number of sites in the City of Vancouver. Staff point out that there will need to be changes to the OCP and Public Assembly land strategy. Today, we received a letter of support for the motion from Kelly Bond, who was with the Task Force on Social Rental and Affordable Housing, and she pointed out that this type of policy was among the recommended goals. And to paraphrase Ms. Bond's words, we could seize this opportunity as we update the OCP this coming year to pre-zone faith groups' lands, especially those along main transportation corridors, which I think is an excellent idea and strongly suggest staff include this option in the report back. The goal is to simplify the process, remove barriers that would limit or slow funding for this type of project, and improve our community. I hope that this motion will activate interest by faith groups in pursuing this and let them know that the district is open for business and open to helping expedite their planning processes for affordable housing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Back, your comments?
Yes, thank you, Mayor Little. Thank you, Councillor Pope, for bringing the motion forward tonight. I am very happy to support it as the housing crisis continues to grow and put immense pressure on so many in our community. I think we need to look at any kind of innovative solution that might get affordable housing built sooner and in more parts of the community. I too have talked to faith groups over the years who have wanted to redevelop their site. I know Gloria Day, I believe, was one of the first ones I talked to, and they wanted to build a seniors housing project of about 80 or so units. But the challenge for them was to try and just get through the process. They saw the opportunity. They wanted to, have a church that would be sort of right size for their congregation and allow housing to be built at the same time. But they found the process to be too much for their small organization. But the opportunity, I think, is huge. As Councillor Pope's report highlights, there's a couple of dozen churches and faith-based organizations who own their own properties in the district, many of which could probably be repurposed as they look to the future and include some element of affordable housing. We know that faith-based organizations have strong roots in our communities that are built on trust and longstanding relationships. We also know that most churches approach solutions with a community-focused sort of mindset. So I think when you apply that to housing, that means they would be designing housing to meet the specific needs of our residents in our community. I also think that relationship of trust could help to build public support for affordable housing projects, which, as we all know, can often face resistance. Many of these organizations also have had a long commitment to addressing poverty and homelessness, which aligns with our goal of providing affordable housing. So I think the fundamental values of service and compassion that faith-based organizations have do make them ideal partners in many cases in this crucial effort. Furthermore, a number of faith-based organizations often already provide essential social services within their churches, food programs, addiction recovery, counseling, and partnerships with them on housing could create housing, not only housing that offers shelter, but also access to some of these much needed support services. There's also as I've alluded to with the one example, faith organizations are committed to long-term stewardship of their properties. So I think having them as partners ensures that affordable housing projects will be well maintained and sustainable for the years to come. So in summary, again, thank you for bringing the idea forward. I know it's not a new idea, but I think it's one that could be used in our community when we look at the number of properties that are attached to faith-based organizations and some of them who have already expressed the desire to look at adding affordable housing. So I think this is a positive step forward should it be supported tonight and explored to its full potential. Thank you.
Thank you. Just my own comments on the matter. This is something I've wrestled with over the years as to what our role is in maintaining public assembly properties in our community, particularly in our close to our town centers. And the challenge I keep running into is that every time we unlock the value of these properties, we actually put a target on the backs of the churches, and we are heaping pressure upon them to change what they do in their spaces. And it's not always as simple as what we talked about with the Marcon development, because the Marcon development was actually used as a reason for why another church, this was one denomination, was purchasing a church property from another denomination. The Marcon properties was used as a justification for a significantly higher value for it. And so the newer growing church couldn't all of a sudden had the property go up by $600,000 when they said that it could be developed in a fashion similar to Marcon. And so while I'm aware of that specific instance, the principle applies and it's problematic. If you unlock the value, raise the value of these properties by unlocking development potential on them, you're actually making it harder for the faith community to change in our community. And so as we have, as an example, we have a growing Muslim population within our community. And many of them would love to be able to get into a church property and have a permanent home rather than renting in light industrial spaces and commercial spaces. And by taking this action, we're actually going to make it significantly harder for them to get into a permanent long-time home in a church space or a public assembly space in the middle of our community. And so those newer growing church communities will actually be stuck as rental tenants rather than being able to develop their own properties. And I think it has the potential to be exclusionary to the point of discrimination. And so this is a very problematic question for me. Are there going to be times when it makes sense to redevelop a property and achieve some local community objective like the Marcon one? And I believe I actually voted in favor of the Marcon development back in the day in about 2012. Because it was about 30 feet outside of the Lynn Valley Town Center. And so we sort of treated it as though it was in the Lynn Valley Town Center at the time. But since that time, I've had some concerns because it leads to the ultimate, ultimately you lose public assembly spaces in your town centers. Their value as housing, their value as other purposes will help you get a congregation, a new facility for today, but it will not set you up on a path for success to maintain that facility or to produce a new facility in the next generation. And so ultimately, you're going to see the withering and removal of public assembly spaces in our town centers. And I don't know that that's what the church and faith community wants, is to see their removal from our town center spaces. So I have a challenge with this. I'm not going to support it at this point, but if some of the solutions that come out of staff make sense, I'm still open to considering alternatives. I just want to say this has the potential to be very discriminatory towards new faiths, growing faiths, and making it so that the groups that were here first have a huge financial advantage over the groups that are developing in our community or becoming the new supporters of faith in our community. So I'm not going to be supporting it tonight. Councillor Ma, your comments.
Thank you. In 2018, BC Housing established a housing hub, which among other goals was to work with faith-based groups to provide affordable housing. The key is to have government funding or to have these faith-based groups partner with developers who would then apply to BC Housing for low-cost financing. The Housing Hub was recently replaced by the provincial government with a new program called BC Builds. I also want to be cognizant of not to put too much work on our planning department, which is focusing on our priorities that council has already approved. I think about coach houses, reviewing that bylaw, the whole bylaw review program, Bill 44, and trying to build a capacity for 22,400 units. Bill 47, TOAs, proposal coming forward soon, and looking at the DAPR program to streamline processes. This is all work that our staff are focused on now. And this is in addition to projects that have been approved in working in partnership with BC Housing. And, you know, we joke about it, but, you know, we really need to get going on 16th and Lloyd. Work needs to start on 1200 East Keith. There's also Old Little Wet. And there's also the Metro Van project on, thank you, on the Maplewood. Staff need to keep their focus on this. I want to be clear. I'm not opposed to affordable housing. I've worked for BC Housing for 6 years prior to coming on council, and I continue to work with the unhoused people on the downtown east side. I trust our staff to know to talk to BC Housing. And, I don't think it's necessary for us to tell them how to do their job, but to be supportive of this, I'm wondering if Councillor Polk would be open to a friendly amendment to direct staff to have those discussions with BC Housing if they haven't already about BC builds. I want to support housing, but I think that the key way to do that now is to do the work that we've approved and let our staff do their jobs. Thank you.
So I want to be clear on how we handle the proposed amendment. And so is that a follow-up motion or is that an amendment to the motion? It's not in collision with the motion in any way. So just checking in with the clerk what your preference would be.
Thank you, through your worship. If Councillors Pope and Back were agreeable to it as a friendly amendment, it could be handled in that matter. If not, it could be as a formal amendment to the motion.
Councillors Pope and Back, do you understand the addition that Councillor Ma has proposed, and is that something you're interested in adding?
I don't see why we need to make an amendment. Why can't we just suggest that staff include that in their report?
Agree. I think the recommendation is fairly open and could include that as part of it.
Mr. Milburn, just checking in, do you think staff have enough direction to include concepts like what Councillor Ma has suggested in with this?
Yeah, I think a useful piece of clarification and then a question might be helpful. So if a nonprofit is partnering, say, with BC Housing or CMHC funding, and that nonprofit happens to be a place of worship, and they approach the district, we already have policy direction from council to prioritize the processing of that application. In the case of adding density along frequent transit corridors and in town centers, we already have some direction from council to bring that back as part of the Bill 44, 46, 47, and Bill 16 updates as part of the OCP and zoning bylaw review. So that analysis is ongoing, and that may impact mixed use properties potential along those corridors and in the town centers. Additionally, as I appreciate the mention of the existing work that is ongoing to try to implement council's already approved policies, sites, that is our definite priority. We want to see those developed as soon as possible in partnership with BC Housing and others. In terms of the direction, the question I have is, if the expectation is to contact each of the public assembly lands that have a current place of worship and to develop strategies to develop those, that would be a significant amount of work to direct staff to go and work with essentially a private landowner and try to facilitate the redevelopment of their property outside of all those processes I already mentioned. So that would be a lot of staff work. That it would be the same staff that are trying to achieve council's directions right now would have to be redirected and redeployed to do that kind of exploration. So I'm just seeking a clarification from council on that.
Just get a clarification from you, Mr. Milburn. So currently our non-mixed use public assembly buildings contemplated or affected by 44, 46, 47?
The opportunity to allocate 22,400 units will be prioritized in frequent transit corridors and town centers as we've had discussions. There'll be options and scenarios presented to council in Q1 of 2025. And those will include lands along those corridors that have mixed use potential. So there are certainly some lands that aren't just purely residentially zoned right now that will have that mixed use potential, which may take up some lands that are currently
they would go into our column if you increase the numbers of units on them, but they're not automatic like the TOAs or TODs. They're not automatically uplifted, even though I think in some cases they have a manse or a residential unit on them. But okay, so back to you, Councillor Ma.
If I can just clarify, BC Housing has a provincial mandate. You know, they have an idea of how much they want to spend in each area and in each program. It could be a simple discussion with them, and they say, hey, great idea. but we don't have enough money.
They always say that.
Well, unless this new government's gonna come with more money, putting a lot of work when we have other projects. I'd rather have our staff focus on what's been approved, but I'll leave it to council to decide. If the amendment fails, that's fine. I won't be supporting the motion as presented. Thanks.
I
You don't need to
clarify
put the
because
amendment for it
Mr.
either.
Milburn asked for clarification of the motion and I would like to clarify it.
That's the motion. right there.
What?
Oh, sorry, on the motion or on the amendment?
On the motion, I think.
Okay. Okay, is there, sure.
Yeah.
You want to further define what's on the screen?
Because he asked, yes. Okay, so zero intention of asking staff to go and contact every single faith-based group on the North Shore to see if they're interested in this. The expectation is that if any are interested in it, they would contact and go through the processes this way. So that is not an added burden on staff. My hope is that this motion will bring some interest and will also bring back suggestions from staff as to how this could be streamlined. We are not at a stage where we'd be moving forward with this and making decisions. The points that you raised, Mr. Mayor, about how the shifting costs and changing of the assembly of lands, of public assembly lands, is not relevant at this stage, because that would be something that I would hope that staff would just be able to report on as to the feasibility of it. So that's all it is. At this stage, it's just an exploration, putting it out there and seeing if it sticks with some faith groups. And if it does, great, then we've got a few more affordable housing units.
What I'm interpreting this to be is that the mover and the seconder have not consented to the amendment that's been proposed. Councillor Ma, knowing these conditions, would you still like to propose the amendment?
If that's the case, I will withdraw my amendment.
Thank you very much. Okay, so back on the original motion, I believe we have Councillor Hanson next.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will be supporting the motion. I'm sensitive to your comments, Mayor Little. I did follow them carefully and appreciate that. From my point of view, the issue is the underutilization of certain lands across the North Shore, which in some cases could have greater community benefit if they were dedicated to housing, specifically affordable housing. The report calls for the staff to investigate and report back, and I'm sensitive to all of the work that staff is doing and that you only have so much capacity. But I think the motion points us towards a potentially fruitful source of opportunity of affordable housing. And with the caveats mentioned, I will be supporting it.
Thank you. Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I won't be supporting the motion. I think Mr. Milburn has laid it out very clearly that we do not have the capacity to report back on opportunities to facilitate places of worships. Places of worship are large landowners across the region, across this country. The funds generally go back to the church. The head of the church, not necessarily the church where the land is being redeveloped. Within the United Church, for instance, or the Catholic Church, the monies and the proceeds would be going back to the Church of Canada or the Catholic Church of Canada. There is absolutely no guarantee that any place of worship would put their property up for affordable housing, whatever that means. Marcon is not necessarily an affordable housing. It was a project to look at multifamily housing and to retain a piece of a public assembly building for community use. And that's what was negotiated. I'll advise that many years ago, we pre-zoned, and Mayor Little has talked about pre-zoning based on the legislation that the provincial government has placed on many properties, and the inability for that negotiation to happen to actually achieve affordable housing units or services for the community. The District of North Vancouver many years ago rezoned Marine Drive. We blanket zoned the entire thing. There were winners and losers. We lost opportunities because we did not include community amenity contributions or any funding that would go to the services that support those multifamily residential units on Marine Drive. We made some very significant errors when we did that. And I think as the mayor's pointed out, there's some significant challenges with the legislation and what that's going to do to the cost of land. You know, churches are not naive, in my opinion, in regards to the property that they're sitting on. And we have had applicants come forward in the past, and some staff supported and some staff did not, because of access, egress, all sorts of issues. Much like elementary schools and how they sit in our area, specifically in the Seymour. We have many of them right in the center of neighborhoods because they were built at a time when most families, you know, if they were lucky to even own a car. And so walking was the required way of getting children to school. And so there's many challenges there. Another thing I'll let you in on is when institutional properties such as schools were being looked at by the school district to increase revenue for the school district, pieces of land attached to schools were being considered for redevelopment. Councillor Hanson, you may remember that. I know Mayor Little remembers that. And we had a very significant checklist that planning staff had put together. And I would actually ask Mr. Milburn maybe to circulate that. But it was a very significant checklist for us to say, are we going to lose something very important in our community by doing this? What are the justifications by allowing public land to be used for development? And that was how we managed through making decisions on some of those properties. You know, these churches for many years have been exempt from property taxes. I'll take my second 2 minutes, please. Because they were an integral part of the community's ability to operate. They looked after the vaccinations. They had the catechism classes for the faith-based organizations. They had brownies and guides. It was a place for people to gather. And they are important facilities in our community. And I think if any of them are interested in coming forward to visit our planning department and talk about opportunities to redevelop, they certainly have that right at any time to walk in. But I think it has to be a conversation that makes sure that there is that negotiation so we do get something that is truly mixed use. I quite frankly, I understand after all these years, the work that our planning department is going to be taking on with this rezoning or reviewing our zoning bylaw. It is an absolutely massive project, as well as all of the legislation that they are under the gun to get done by the end of 2025. So I just ask council to be respectful of their time and their capacity to be able to do any more work. And this is certainly not something that's simple.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, your comments?
Thank you, Your Worship. Number of the points I was going to raise have already been raised. The concern about underutilization of private land, I don't think that's our role. It's private land. If it was public land, it's our role, but it's not our role, with respect. The definition of come up with affordable, I mean, 6 years later, I know that this council still doesn't agree on what affordable housing actually is. I know what I mean, but I know other people here don't think what I think. I agree with you, Mayor, that it is putting a target on the back, and it will outprice any new people from coming in once that lift happens. I don't see that we're gaining anything with this particular motion because council has already given staff the authority to prioritize these kinds of applications. And it's not that we can spend our resources going and trying to convince them that they should do this. If they want to do it, they just need to come to us. It's already prioritized as Mr. Milburn has said, and it'll go faster. So I don't know what we're gaining by this that isn't already in place. The other thing is that defining the public assembly lands, it includes social, recreational, educational, and religious to provide to support community health and well-being. So I'm not willing just without more discussion either to give up what could be a recreational space. The church could have an activity there that would be open to the community. We are losing our park spaces, and maybe we're going to end up turning to churches to have more activity on their land if they have underutilized land. So those are my comments. And I also, the one last thing I was going to say is, with the amount of everybody else, or most people have said, with the amount of work we're asking of staff, the district doesn't have the resources to start bringing on more brand new things that are going to involve them, especially when, as I see it, this is already in place. If somebody comes to us from a church and they want to do this, staff has already been told to prioritize it. So I won't be voting for this.
Thank you, Councillor Forbes. Councillor Beck.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I'm a little bit confused at the pushback to a fairly straightforward motion that, you know, I'm as respectful as anybody about staff's time and the limited resources and all that we ask of our staff to do. But when I look at this motion, I think, you know, we're not asking for an extremely detailed report that I can see with many different options. What we're looking for is, you know, some focus around this topic about maybe how we can just provide some guidance to faith-based organizations, resources. It might be relatively straightforward, and we're also not making a decision on how we're going to, you know, go about forcing anyone to make a change to private property. But I think we all have to see the opportunity that exists with the amount of properties that, you know, that are faith-based organizations and churches. You know, I shared one example tonight, but there's been a few that I've talked to over the years that I can appreciate Councillor Forbes saying, well, they would just come to us if they want to do this. They're not big developers, you know, they're churches and they're volunteers. So I think, you know, for us to be able to provide some resources and examples and ways for them to look to, you know, generating some affordable housing on their properties and renew their organizations. I think that's something that we could potentially play a role in. But I don't see this as creating a ton of work. I'm careful when I say that because I do recognize the amount of work that staff receive. But I think this is an opportunity and one that we should be looking at given the importance and great need for affordable housing wherever we can put it.
Okay. I see no further speakers on the matter. I'm prepared to call the question. All those in favor? Contrary minded? Motion is defeated with Mayor Little, Councillors Forbes, Murray, and Ma opposed. Okay, that completes the regular business with council. We do have, we're a little bit ahead of time. We're not at the drop dead time. I don't want to belabor or extend the night too much more, but I will look for some reports. So Mr. Stewart, do you have any reports that you'd like to share with the meeting? Thank you very much. Just my own, just a couple of quick comments. One, just want to extend my deep appreciation to the Veterans Council and to our legions for hosting really great, welcoming, barrier-free opportunities for people to recognize, observe Remembrance Day and all of the people who have served our country and also specifically those who have paid the ultimate sacrifice to defend our way of life. I did attend the Remembrance Day ceremony at Victoria Park in the city of North Vancouver with our city colleagues, and it was packed. It was so great to see the community out coming to support the veterans and observe Remembrance Day. And that one obviously had a parade up and down Lonsdale that was also very well attended by the community. It's just, I just really appreciate the work that everybody does through the poppy tagging campaign to fundraise for our legions, and all of those dollars will go to good activities and events in our community. My next report is on, we had a shirt sleeve session with NVCan, which was an opportunity for us to catch up with our community associations. It was nice to get together and just be social and have an informal chit chat with people who are really key drivers in a lot of events in our community. You think of, Canada Day events, the Blue Ridge Good Neighbor Day, Lynn Valley Days, Parkgate Days. All of these really incredible, well-attended events in our community are largely led by these community associations. And so, plus also all candidates meetings, including the recent provincial election as well. And so it was a great opportunity to just catch up with those people in our community and thank them for all the work they're doing for us and for their neighbors. Other than that, those are the only two reports I have tonight. I've got councillors Back, Murray, Ma, and Forbes. There we go. Councillor Back.
Just on Remembrance Day, I attended the Lynn Valley Legion's ceremony along with Councillor Ma. That ceremony is growing every year, and it's got its own feel. I think it's very much a family-friendly ceremony. Saw lots of young families there, lots of kids. So big thanks to the Lynn Valley Legion, and I think they've raised over $80,000 or so through this year's Poppy campaign. Also, along with Councillor Pope, attended the wrap up for Craft Beer Week, and want to congratulate Vancouver's North Shore Tourism on a successful 2 weeks of featuring our craft breweries and distilleries across the North Shore. The wrap up was down at the Pipe Shop this past Saturday night, and was well attended. And it's just great to see the craft breweries thriving and more of them coming on board every year. Of course, we've got Beva Brewing now, and I think Bridge Brewing will be opening their flagship location down in that area, Pemberton and Marine Drive. So great product and great spaces for people to connect and build community. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor, next I see is Councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mayor Little. I too attended the Remembrance Day event at Kate's Park along with Councillor Hanson and Councillor Pope. And it was another great event. It was very well attended. A couple of sound glitches, but that's all going to be looked after next year. And because we go every year, we knew the program, and so it was a great event and very well attended with families and lots of dogs. Brought my dogs down. I also attended the Community Association North Van Can meeting, and that was really good. And I was thinking maybe the next one we could invite our local MLAs to attend. I think it would be really helpful for them to get to know the community associations that they may not be connected with, but also just to have a really good roundtable discussion on different issues. Certainly the ones they brought up were pertinent to not only municipal government, but provincial. And then yesterday, after the Atmospheric River in Deep Cove, one of our local mortgage brokers, Lindsay Whittam extraordinaire, very, very community-minded member of the Deep Cove community, approached me with a program that the Royal Bank of Canada sponsors. And basically they sponsor up to 4 events a year to a local community initiative. And finance was very helpful in helping us get this started, but RBC will be donating a check of up to $1,600 to the municipality 4 times before the end of the year. We might overlap into January, and that money will be directed to look at to purchase flood mitigation equipment for the Deep Cove community. And I think this is the beginning of a great relationship with RBC and the District of North Vancouver. And I'm just indebted to Lindsay for bringing it forward, and her co-workers that came out. We picked up garbage yesterday. I spent some time with them, and yeah, Deep Cove was pretty tidy, but there were some areas that we needed to do a bit of work with. So we'll look forward to those programs coming forward in the years to come.
Thank you. Councillor Forbes, you have a report?
Yes, thank you. Yeah, I think you may have mentioned this also, but you and I attended the Lynn Valley AGM, and we also had the MLA Susie Jan at that meeting as well. And it was very interesting. Of course, number one was North Shore Waste and Sewer Plant, and transportation. Those were their two biggest concerns. But it was really good to get together with all of them. The Edgemont AGM as well, I just wanted to mention that NISM and the RCMP also did a presentation there. And I must admit, I went home thinking about some of the things that NISM said that I don't do. So now I'm going to start trying to do them. So it was good. It was informative and it kept us up to date. The North Van Can shirt sleeves as well. We had that meeting with them, and I think that my discussion with some of the other members from North Van Can that attended there would like us to do that, not on a regular basis, but more often than once every couple of years. So hopefully we can build a relationship there. And I thought it was a good way to have a conversation with them rather than in a formal setting like this. We were able to express ideas back and forth. And again, the same two main topics came up again.
Yes.
But anyway, that's my report. Oh, and the Finance and Audit Committee as well, but we already talked about them just about every item tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Ma?
Yes, I just want to reiterate what Councillor Back said, that the Remembrance Day event at the Lynn Valley Legion is growing. It's a key community event. We had opportunity to just quickly touch base with MLA Susie Chant, and I was really impressed by the Legion relationship with TWN. Curtis Thomas was there, and you can just see that the groups are working together. And I know that Councillor Back won't say this, but I'll give him a plug. He's playing at the Legion this Thursday, so we'll see you there 7 o'clock.
I think it's important. Sorry, yes.
Oh, I was just going to say that on November 8th,
Yes.
I attended with yourself the Tsleil-Waututh Remembrance Day ceremony at Kate's Park as well. And there were members of Burnaby Council, West Van Council, the City of North Vancouver Council, Tsleil-Waututh, and they celebrate both living veterans, members of the nation. They had 3 members of the nation that were former members of the U.S. Army, and then they also celebrate those members of the nation that have passed. And so their youth were very involved with it, and they talked about past relatives that had played a role, and then we laid wreaths at the memorial in Kate's Park in partnership with the youth. So it was a great celebration, and it was well attended as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Murray. Okay, I see no further reports. We've completed the business of this evening's meeting. I accept adjournment from Councillor Murray. Thank you very much to the staff for preparation of the reports for our consideration. Thank you to members of the public for sticking with us through the council meeting, and thank you to members of council for your consideration and deliberation of tonight's items. Everybody have a fantastic week. Good night.